Redditors, how long did your shortest relationship last and why? My previous relationship only lasted about a month. She was completely out of her mind and I'm happy that I was able to dodge a bullet before we got serious with each other. I have no issues with claiming your partner publicly, but this girl took it to a psychotic level that I would have never thought of. I was working at a retail chain, and I met my ex when I was covering for a coworker at another store. She came off as such an easygoing and nonchalant person, and she was also super attractive to me. Like exactly my type. As much as I liked her physically, I think her appearance sort of blinded me from her red flags when we first started talking. We started hanging out outside of work and soon enough we were hooking up a couple times a week. She had an incredible body, and it was some of the best intimacy of my entire life. Again, I think our physical connection made me look at her with rose-colored glasses and I asked her to be my girlfriend after only knowing her for about 3 weeks. Everything was fine for the first month that we were dating. She was a very sweet person, and she was always checking on me and making sure that I was having a good day. At first, I felt really cared for, and it was nice to have so much attention from someone who obviously liked me so much. But then things got weird as time went on. She started to act super clingy, like getting upset if I didn't reply immediately to her morning texts. Once she ignored me for 3 days straight because she had seen another woman's arm in my Instagram story. I should have cut it off right then, but I didn't. Everything imploded after I started letting her sleep over my place. When I look back, I honestly can't believe I even let her in my house knowing how crazy she turned out to be. One night after I had fallen asleep, my ex took my phone and decided to make some insane mark of hers on every single one of my social media pages. First, she went through my Instagram and my Facebook and deleted every single photo of me with another woman, including my own mother. Then she went through all of my following lists and deleted and unfollowed every single person who happened to be female. As if this wasn't crazy enough, she took a selfie and wrote a caption saying that she was my girl now and that all you other bitches better back off. Less than 3, on top of this she put her initials in all of my social media bios. When we woke up in the morning, she had put my phone back on the charger like nothing happened, and we spent the morning together since she was completely normal, like she hadn't just taken a massive dump over every single one of my public social media profiles. It wasn't until later that day that I realized what she had done. I wanted to call and ask her who the hell she thought she was and why she thought it was okay to do all this, but I honestly was kind of scared of her at this point. She was reminding me of the type of women I watched on the show Snapped, and I just didn't want anything else to do with her, so I never confronted her, and I just blocked her on everything and completely ghosted her. That was only a couple of months ago, and I still have some lingering fears that she might pop out of nowhere and try to get revenge on me. I mean, she's already revealed herself to be that type of person. So all I can do is pray for myself.
I refuse to let my son join my ex's vegan supremacist lifestyle. That lettuce stuff is for freaks. I have a 3-year-old with my ex. When I found out I was pregnant, we were together for 2 years and he had proposed 2 months before. It was public, we both posted about it. At first, he was excited, but when I was 7 months he broke up with me and moved out. I asked if he was going to be involved and he said no and blocked me everywhere. Our son is 3 now. Earlier this year he reached out to me saying he matured and regrets not being in our son's life. I asked how he matured and what changed in the 3 years he had been no contact, and he said that he had a new lifestyle and this and that. Come to find out he's married to a hardcore hippie vegan and living a completely different life. He lives on a farm now and has a lot of animals, none he makes a profit off of. I was beyond shocked. He also doesn't smoke or drink and is just so different. I spoke to my boyfriend, friends, and parents and they said to give him a chance. He offered to start paying for his daycare and has been since May. I allowed him to meet my son in a supervised setting at the farm. I wanted to see the horses and animals lol, and met his wife. She inherited the farm and completely redesigned it. She was teaching me and my sisters about her raw organic vegan lifestyle and fed us a potato stew she made. It was really good and I thought things went well. They seemed trustworthy. We've done a few more supervised visits throughout the year and I only now feel comfortable letting him stay overnights alone. They feed him vegan and I don't mind. The issue is they sat me down recently and asked that I start feeding him vegan full-time since it's much better for him and in the world, and that since he wants more involvement it makes sense he has a plant-based lifestyle. I said no, I myself am not vegan and they are not even the vegan chicken nuggets from Walmart type, they are the strictly raw fruits and vegetables type, and that's asking me to learn a whole other type of cooking. They offered to meal prep during my time. He said in 2024 he wants 50-50 custody, but that if I am difficult he will go for full custody considering our age and income difference and that I still live with my parents. I told him by threatening me he can see me in court and left. One of my sisters who came with me to a few of the visits has been vegetarian for many years now and she says I'm being unreasonable since it is healthier for him, and they even offered to cook all his meals. And that eating vegan for a while, it will mess up his digestive system if he eats meat, and to just choose one, and that since it's a lifestyle for them and he will be involved in it, to just agree or in the jerk. A disgusting guy tried to manipulate me into having intimacy without protection, so I kicked him out and threatened to call the cops. So I met this guy out in the world. He asks me out on a date. I accept. We get along swimmingly. We've been dating for about 3 weeks and it's getting on time for intimacy. It feels natural and right. We are both a bit older past that time in life where we jump in bed right away, so this is a planned activity. He's going to spend the night for the first time. For me, this is a big step with someone. Now I'm going to tell you that part of this is completely my fault because we didn't discuss protection beforehand. But my gosh, it's 2024, aren't condoms a given nowadays? We did discuss STDs and we both said we didn't have any in the last time we'd been tested. Anywho. Things are going hot and heavy, and like the Girl Scout I am, I reach into the nightstand and pull out a condom. He said, "What the F is that for?" I knew immediately that this was going to be an issue and that I'd made a mistake. He wanted to discuss it in bed, but I insisted we gather our clothing back on and head out to the living room for a discussion. His attitude was snarky, condescending, and his words were designed to make me feel bad about insisting on condoms. He couldn't believe that I didn't trust him. How could I have intimacy with him if I didn't trust him 100%? Honestly, if I had any small amount of trust for someone I met 3 weeks ago, it's certainly gone out the window with this display. Who the hell knows what you have or your recent partners might, because you are obviously into high-risk intimacy. His next tactic is trying to convince me that safety is an illusion, that I was being stupid, illogical, and an overly cautious, silly female. I said, "Has that actually worked for you before?" Because that's the craziest thing I ever heard. Life is full of risks, so nothing is ever 100% safe, but it's perfectly reasonable and logical to at least take precautions. Do you wear a seatbelt in the car? Safety glasses if you are using a saw? A helmet for riding a bike? Those activities can kill you, but you still use reasonable precautions, right? The very fact that you are trying to make me feel crazy and wrong for wanting you to wear a condom lets me know we are never going to be compatible, and you can F right off. Seriously. I walked over to the front door, opened it, and said, "Please leave. Now." He asked if this meant I was breaking it off with him. Hell yes, I am. He said he couldn't believe that I would break it off over something so trivial and was refusing to leave. The chutzpah of this guy just pissed me off. Yeah, my health, so effing trivial, dude. I grabbed his overnight bag and the shirt he brought on a hanger and threw them out into the hallway. "I'm not wasting another breath on you, a-hole. Get out now or I'm calling the cops." He did finally leave, and I immediately locked the door, blocked his phone number and email address, and haven't spoken to him since. Good riddance to bad rubbish. The crazy thing is that his responses and arguments were something that he's practiced before. He was too slick and too prepared. He's done this before, maybe a bunch of times before. Ladies, don't fall for any of that shit and let them make you feel bad or crazy or unreasonable for sticking up for yourself. The slightest pushback or excuse on this issue is a giant red flag. Your body and your health are worth it.
Am I the a-hole for making my future in-law babysit his siblings during my wedding? My fiancé, 28M, and I, 26F, are currently facing a difficult situation with his aunt, 39F, regarding our decision to have a child-free wedding. Let me provide some context. My fiancé comes from a large family, particularly on his father's side, with many cousins. His father is the only one among his siblings who has just one child, my fiancé. We mutually agreed to have a child-free wedding after a thorough discussion. We wanted our special day to be uninterrupted and focused on us. It also aligned with our budget and venue capacity, allowing us to have a more intimate affair. Additionally, we decided to host a separate family gathering a week after the wedding, where children of all ages could join in the celebration. We thought this would be a fair compromise and ensure that everyone feels included. We sent out invitations last week, clearly stating that the wedding would be child-free and that there would be a family party for all ages afterwards. However, his aunt called him to address what she believed was a mistake on the invite. He assured her that this was intentional, and it applied to all guests, including her. She disagreed and engaged in an argument with him. The situation escalated when she made an unreasonable demand. She declared that none of her children, except the one in her womb, would be attending the wedding. She tried to guilt my fiancé by emphasizing how much her children loved him, even claiming that his eldest cousin, 19M, initially selected as a groomsman, would also be absent. She cited financial challenges in finding a sitter for her 7 kids, further stating that she wouldn't trust anyone with their care. My fiancé ended the call to protect his own well-being, but she continues to bombard us with messages. The only aspect making us question ourselves is that his cousin reached out, expressing disappointment and asking if we could allow children at the wedding. He specifically mentioned that he wanted to participate in our special day without having to babysit. We feel sympathetic towards him and want him to be a part of our wedding, but we still want to maintain a child-free event. Making an exception for his aunt's children while excluding others would create resentment among our guests. However, if we open the door to all children, it would undermine our original intention and make us unhappy. Are we being unreasonable here? Should we reconsider our decision? To clarify, his aunt's children are aged 19M, 15M, 13M, 12F, 9MF fraternal twins, 5F, and 3M. They also have a baby on the way, for whom they plan to have a gender reveal party once the mother is 8 months pregnant. She is currently 3 months along.
I'm 4 months pregnant and I just found out my husband has been banging my mother while he was working overtime to provide for our baby. I have found out my husband is having intimacy with my mother. I honestly don't know how to react. I'm 4 months pregnant and I'm trying not to stress since it's bad for the baby. I honestly had suspicions about my husband cheating. When I announced my pregnancy, he seemed happy. Over the moon actually. He was kissing me and telling me how lucky he was to have me, but now he changed. About 2 weeks after my surprise announcement, he stopped hugging me and kissing me like usual. He stopped eating the meals I'd make for him after work and said he already ate some fast food or something. I also noticed he had changed his lock screen, which was a picture of us. Not sure if that meant anything, to be honest. I found out 3 days ago. I went through his phone while he was in the shower and found text messages, videos, pictures. I'm sick to my stomach thinking about what I saw. I saw pictures of my mom in lingerie and he was replying with pictures of his PP, saying he was so hard for her. I even saw a message of regret. He had said that maybe they should stop since he didn't want to hurt me, but my mom said I wouldn't get hurt as long as they kept it all a secret. But what angered me the most was the message she sent a few days ago. I'll quote it here so anyone reading this can get an idea of how serious their affair is and has been. I love you so much. More than you think. You've helped me through the passing of my beloved ex-husband, and for that I truly thank you. I know it is hard for you to keep a secret like this, for me it is too. I love my daughter with all my heart, but she will have to accept eventually that love is love and that the heart wants what it wants. Our hearts want each other. I thought that ever since my husband died, nobody would ever love me because I'm just an old woman, but you have shown me to love myself and made me feel young and hot again. Let's keep having fun and cherishing each other. I think it's important to know my father passed away about 5 years ago from a stroke, and my mother said she refused to get back into dating or romance because my father is her forever love and only. It's absolute bull. I'm crushed, and it's the fact that I know they had intimacy after that message, because that was the night he didn't come home until 1 in the morning due to work and paid overtime. I actually threw up after reading that message. I have screenshots of the messages and have sent the videos to myself. Of course I deleted them on his phone so it looked like he never sent me anything. I'm numb. I'm confused. I'm hurt so bad. I can't even cry because I refuse to believe it. My husband is at work. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed writing this. Any advice? Please. I'm desperate for just a little bit of anything, really. This baby in me is honestly the only thing preventing me from confrontation. I'm afraid that confronting them now will cause too much stress and anger, and I want the best for my child. At this point all I want to do is have my baby. Christmas is soon and I don't want to ruin it for the family. I had also planned on announcing my pregnancy that day. Please help me.
What is important for virgins to know about their first time? It only takes one nut to be a father. The more you know. It gets better. Shower first. Nobody expects your first time to be good. If anything, if it's your first, they don't expect much at all. So just go for it and enjoy it. If it sucks or doesn't last long, then just blow it off and say, well, I guess we need to practice together more. Don't take tips from corn. It's the biggest deal in the world before it happens, and not that big of a deal after it happens. The hole is actually a bit further south than you would think. But not too south. Parents, how did your kid become a disappointment? My 19-year-old daughter failed in her first semester of college. Not a big deal, sometimes freshmen get overwhelmed and don't do so hot in their classes. My daughter, however, just decided to not show up to the classes that weren't theater related. So she failed math and English, which she could have aced. Now, had she owned up to this, there would have been little issue. Lesson learned, do better on probation and pass the classes next semester. What she did do was just not register for classes for the next semester and try her luck at living in the dorms, illegally. Somehow it took the college 3 months to catch up with her. She finally fessed up, in March. By that time, she had been trespassing at the college for those 3 months. We had to beg the college to not throw her into prison. We were literally on the phone with college officials for an hour begging them to just let her come home. She screwed up, but she's learned her lesson. Luckily, if you can call it that, her grandmother rushed to her rescue and paid off her outstanding balance on her bill, $6,000 for the 3 months she lived on campus, boarding and food card. Her grandmother, my mom, then proceeded to tell my daughter she never had to return to us. We were evil people and she would protect her from the likes of us. My daughter, who used to call me every night and called me any time she had problems, cut all ties with us because facing her responsibilities wasn't a requirement anymore. We tried calling her, tried telling her we weren't angry and to just come home. Nothing doing. We would have been angry, but we would have worked it out. Instead, we became the bad guys in her fairy tale, and for the past 5 months, she's gone on shopping sprees, goofed off, and had the time of her life. I've seen her twice since it all happened. Both times she treated me like an evil monster. Both times I went home in tears, despising my mother more and more. My daughter is going back to school tomorrow like nothing ever happened. My beach is paying for it. You might be thinking, be grateful she's footing the bill. The problem with that is my oldest daughter has worked her butt off to get her degree, and my mom refused to help her because she's bi. She's doing this to get back at her for embarrassing her in front of her church. I refused to let the younger daughter get help from her because of this in the past, so my younger daughter also stabbed her older sister in the back by doing this. I'm so very disappointed in the entitled brat my daughter has become, and if I ever see my beach of a mother again, I'll wring her fat neck, right in front of all those Christians in her church.
I destroyed my fiancé's dead ex-wife's photos. My fiancé Ale was with his deceased ex-wife Lorraine when they were in middle school. He has 2 kids, Basil and Bertie. He was married to his deceased ex-wife Lorraine when she was 18 and he was 19. They had their son after they got married. Sadly, Lorraine passed away from childbirth with their daughter Birdie. I comforted him when he was grieving. After a year of her passing, we got into a relationship. He's the best partner I can ever ask for, and we are getting married in summer of July. Birdie sees me as her mother and Basil sees me more as an aunt than a mom. I was always Auntie Coco. Basil does have a picture of Ale and him and Lorraine when she was 5 months pregnant with Birdie. He does not have a picture of us together as a family. He still misses his mom. I was kinda a little jealous of Lorraine. Especially during high school. Sometimes I wish I was the birth mother of Basil and Birdie. I wished I had his kids first, and Ale doesn't want any more kids biologically. Because he told me he only wanted Lorraine to have his kids. He had the snip. He told me he'd rather just adopt, or I use a donor, which makes me upset. I felt so insecure about all of it and was thinking Lorraine is in the way. All of Ale's friends knew Lorraine in and out. Since they all knew each other in middle school and had the same old friend group growing up all together. Especially Ale's best friend Jordan. He adored Lorraine. So did his wife Ruth, who is Lorraine's best friend. I know them, but I am not close to them. They all talk about Lorraine from time to time. They are the godparents of Basil and Birdie, so they're around a lot. I, however, didn't know Lorraine that much, but she was nice to me. I felt like I was intruding in Ale's beautiful family. I remember going through the attic and finding some of Lorraine's and Ale's belongings. With photos from middle school to before her passing. I found a lot of horse antiques, as Lorraine grew up on a horse ranch and loved horses. Ale was keeping this for his kids to give when they were older, to treasure their mother's stuff. I also found another box filled with Lorraine's collection of old vintage and antique stuff of horses and gifts from her friends and family. I got jealous, as Ale was planning on giving this stuff of Lorraine's horse collection and gifts to Birdie. Ale has already given Birdie Lorraine's old stuffed zebra when she was a young child, and given Basil an old knife that belonged to Lorraine's grandfather. All I know is, I wanted everything gone. When Ale took Basil and Birdie to Lorraine's parents' house for a few days, I stayed back because of work. I knew this was an opportunity to get rid of Lorraine's stuff and photos. So I took the knife and the stuffed zebra, all the photos of Lorraine in it, and her antique horse collection. Burned all the photos, threw her antique collection away and destroyed some. Cut open all the stuffed toys of Lorraine's and destroyed all letters she wrote. I felt satisfied knowing she won't be a bother and nothing to be jealous of anymore. I felt happy and not remorseful. When Ale and the kids came back, I pretended as nothing happened and was just normal. It only took a few days when they noticed. Especially Basil. He couldn't find his photo of him and his mother or the knife. He raised awareness of the disappearance of the stuff, which got Ale searching for the zebra. But couldn't have been found. We moved to a new house a few months after. Ale searched through the attic to pack stuff and noticed that only Lorraine's stuff was all gone. He did question me, as he knew about my insecurities and jealousy of Lorraine. But I told him that I would never do anything like that. He believed me. Thinking he left her stuff back at the old house. Even to this day he still doesn't know. Lorraine's parents and friends are very sad about it because they loved Lorraine like a daughter. I wish they loved me like one. Even Birdie is sad about the zebra. But that thing was old and gross. So I got her a new one. She doesn't love it like her old one, but she sleeps with it once in a while.
What did someone do for you when you were young that made your childhood magical? I have 2 younger brothers and we are 3-ish years apart. I love both of my brothers very much. Our relationships were just different. My little brother was the heir apparent and did lots of things with my dad, golf, fishing, etc. But my baby brother hung out with me and mom. I loved to do things with baby brother. I would read to him and play with him and cook him cheese toast. All kinds of things a big sister should do. We had pets as kids, dogs, kitties, a fish or 3. Here's the magical part. One year when BB was about 7 or 8 years old, he started begging Mom to take him to the mall. It was the week before Easter. Mom would ask him why he wanted to go to the mall so badly, and he would reply that it was a secret. Every time he would ask, she would say no. He would cry. On the Saturday before Easter, she finally broke down and took him to the mall all by himself as he requested. BB and Mom returned about 30 minutes later. BB hollered at me to close my eyes. All of the family had gathered around to see what this secret mission had been about. BB came up to me and put an adorable fuzzy baby duck in my lap. Yes, the ducky was cute, but the magic was what he told me. Michelle, I've saved all my money since Christmas to get you this little friend that you can snuggle and play with and read to whenever I'm not here, because you are the best sister in the world and I never want you to be lonely. That magical gift from that BB was many moons ago. I say it has made my childhood, my life magical because I carry that in my heart and it always makes me smile. FYI, we named the duck Bunny. It was Easter after all. She slept in her box or in my bean bag. She was housebroken, so she would tap on the back door to go out and to come in again. She had a small pool in our backyard. We loved her so much, enough to know that she needed to go live with the rest of the ducks at Grandma's farm. Bunny lived a long, happy life. We went to visit her with peanut butter crackers, her favorite, and she had 15 ducklings.
I expected my family to pay for my birthday dinner, but they didn't, and I couldn't eat. Yesterday I turned 18 years old. For the past 6 years, like clockwork, every day on my birthday, we'd go to the same place for dinner and I'd always get the same thing. For those who are a bit confused, I have extreme OCD and high-functioning autism. Which means I'm very well regulated and like things to stay the same way that they always have been. Back to the story. Every year on my birthday we go to Applebee's. The first thing I would get is the steak and shrimp parmesan with a side of loaded mashed potatoes and cheesy steamed broccoli. Hate me or not, with a side of mozzarella sticks. In total, it's around $30. A bit expensive, I know. I couldn't really tell something was off until a bit later because when me, my mother, my stepfather, and my older brother sat down, they didn't really say anything. I was confused at first and started tapping my fingers on one another like I always do. The conversation went a little bit like this. Mother, well. I was rather confused. Well? Mother, aren't you gonna call the waiter over? This gave me extreme anxiety. I have extreme issues with speaking with people and I tend to stutter and get very, very scared if that's the right word. I asked her if she could do it and she does it in a huff. My dad and brother staring nonchalantly. As she calls the waiter over, the alarm bells are ringing in my head. This is never how it went before. As the waiter gets to the table, he asks everyone what they want and everyone's orders. As he gets to me, my mother stops him and tells him, separate bill. This is when my heart began beating very fast. I don't have a job, all the money I get is from our neighbors raking leaves. I just kind of freeze. I don't really say anything and I get a really bad stomach ache from the anxiety. This is where I am conflicted on whether I'm the jerk or not. My mother would explain at the table that now that I am 18 I should be able to pay for my own things. I was already feeling nauseous from the situation, so I just said I don't have the money. My mom kinda huffs and shoos the waiter away. This soured the dinner party. However, my mom also paid for my 23-year-old brother. My family kept calling me an entitled little brat the whole ride home. When I got home I just ran to my room and cried. They'd been ignoring me the whole day. I may be bad at social cues, but my family has never acted like this before, I mean never. They've been treating me horribly the whole day. I feel very angry and upset at my family. If I would have been warned, I would have saved my raking money. I also don't mean for this to be a validation post, I have all the information you have, I'm just very confused and I'm terrible with social cues. Asperger's, am I right? My family gets a little tight on money. I guess I really should have asked before I assumed they were gonna pay it for me, but I missed out on my birthday dinner because I wasn't mature enough to bring my own money. I'm just gonna rake leaves for a couple weeks to save up enough money to order it from takeout.
I quit my job because they refused to pay me as much as the guy I was training. Many years ago, I was working as a systems analyst for a small computer company. The company did payroll, etc., for other companies who were too small to have their own IT department. It was a very small company. There were two people who actually ran the computer systems, me and a night shift guy. The way the process worked, I would do the programming that needed to be done, set up the schedule for computer time, and hand it off to the night shift guy. He would run the jobs, gather and file all the reports, and send them off to the customer companies. Then he'd do a complete system backup, daily, because we were essentially playing with other people's money. The night shift guy was older, and knew his stuff. It was a pleasure to work with him. But about 6 months into this job, the night shift guy retires. The company hires a new night shift guy. The new guy was a total tool. Fresh out of college. Didn't know anything practical. I'm told I need to train him. Okay. So now I'm working 10-hour days. My usual schedule, plus a couple of hours over in the evening to train this guy. Except the guy just can't learn. I start getting calls about 2 to 3 a.m. because he screwed something up. I have to get up in the middle of the night, drive 30 minutes to the office, straighten out his mess, drive back home, and still show up at 8 a.m. This happens about 2 to 3 times a week. One night, I get the usual wee hour of the morning call. I drag myself in. His problem? The backup tape won't load. So when I got there, I discovered that when the first tape didn't load, he went to the next tape, and the next, and the next. The guy has effed up 6 months of backup. 6 months. His problem? He forgot the backup command. Instead, he was typing the erase command. 6 months of erase tapes. So I do the backup, and consider how I'm gonna break the news to the boss the next morning that we now have a 6-month gap in our archives. While we are waiting for the backup to run, we go next door to the all-night coffee shop. While we are sitting there, me only half awake and already dreading having to be back in the office in a few hours, the new guy starts complaining about his salary. While I'm thinking he's lucky if he even keeps this job for another month, he tells me how much he's making. Which is about 20% more than I, the person who's training him, am making. And I'm working on salary, so I don't even get compensated for the middle of the night rescue runs. Me, who has been waiting 3 months for a promised raise that never materializes, and who even with a non-existent raise would still not be making as much money as this idiot. At this point, I'm done. At 8 a.m., I walk into the office. With a couple of empty boxes. I clean out my desk. I walk over to the boss's office. I say, with packed boxes in my arms, what's the status of that raise? He looks at me and says, well, it will be a while. We just can't afford it right now. I say, not a problem. Walk out to my car and drive home. Get a call later that afternoon from the receptionist. She asks me where I am. I say I'm home, I quit, and they can just mail me my last paycheck. Next day, I got a call from my boss. He asks if I plan to come to work that day, like there's nothing wrong. I say no. He wants to know why I'm upset. He needs me to come in. There are deadlines to meet. I tell him that he should get his new employee who is worth more money than I am to work both jobs, the way I've been doing for the last 2 months. Boss then explains to me that the other employee must be paid more because he has a degree in something, while my degree is only in something different. I tell him good luck with that and hang up. My roommate became an NPC streamer and it drove me so insane that I smashed her phone. I live in an apartment with a couple other college students, but I am the only medical student, so I honestly think my schoolwork is much more demanding and important than any of theirs. I am currently in medical school for my master's degree, and I spend anywhere between 8 to 12 hours a day studying in my room. The rest of my roommates are English majors and journalism majors. They spend a lot of time partying and I get annoyed when they are loud for hours on end. I don't want to move out since the rent in this place is so cheap, but I really wish I lived with some more ambitious students since they're honestly just a bunch of losers to me. Thought I understand not everybody has the smarts and the organization skills to attempt a medical degree. The further I get into school the harder it seems to get. Anyway, I have one particular roommate who is a complete airhead. She's addicted to her phone and is constantly watching TikToks really loud on the couch. I already disliked her before any of this happened, but now I could just smash her face in whenever I see her. About a month ago she started NPC streaming. It is the most brainless effing job I have ever seen somebody do in my life, and I'm honestly embarrassed that a grown woman would reduce herself to that. If you don't know what that is, she basically just stays on TikTok live all day and gives the same exact annoying reactions to whatever tips she gets. Apparently she's been making a lot of money, but I don't think any amount of money is worth humiliating yourself like that. She doesn't do it in her room because she insists that the living room has better light, and so I'm forced to listen to her streams for hours on end while I'm trying to study. Again, this has been going on for almost a month, and I'm pretty sure she started to skip her classes so she doesn't have to stop her. I have been trying everything to cope with this new constant annoyance. I bought a sound blanket from Amazon to hang on my door. I bought expensive headphones, but absolutely nothing keeps out her constant noise. The other day I got a grade back for an exam that I was unable to study well for because of her distracting me, and sure enough I had tanked it. It was the first time I had ever failed an exam and I was so angry that I could have cried. When I got home that night, I walked into the living room and of course my roommate was sitting there at the kitchen table doing one of her stupid effing streams. I walked behind her to go into my room, and I was appalled when she turned around and told me to get the hell out of her frame. I really don't know what happened to me at that moment. I'm usually such a calm and collected guy, but at that moment this woman had just pushed me to the brink. I turned around and walked back over to her. I looked her in the eyes and picked up her phone just to smash it on the kitchen table as hard as I possibly could. Of course the beach started shrieking at me asking me what I had just done, but I wasn't having any of it and I just walked back into my room. She was banging on my door saying that I needed to replace her phone and calling me an a-hole, but I don't think I should replace it since this only happened she was being so loud and using the communal space. I decided I'm not paying her poop, and if she's making so much money from those streams she certainly has the money to replace her phone so she can keep making idiot of herself on the internet. What's the most socially accepted form of self-harm? I remember the first time I realized I was hurting myself. I was just a sophomore in high school, feeling overwhelmed and lost. All of my friends seemed to have it together, but I was struggling to keep up with the workload and social pressures. One day, I found myself scratching my arms until they were red and sore, just to distract myself from the pain inside. It started off small, just a little graze here and there, but before I knew it, I was cutting myself with razor blades and feeling a strange sense of relief. It was almost like the pain I inflicted upon myself was a way to release all of the anxiety, stress, and self-doubt that I had been carrying around for years. But what's messed up is that nobody talked about this stuff. Everyone would shame me for having a mental breakdown or even trying to express my feelings. Instead of getting the help I needed, society kept pushing me to hide my pain and conform to their norms. And worst of all, people acted like self-harm was some taboo topic that you should never discuss. I mean, I get it. It's not like I want to walk around with scars and bruises on display. But why can't we talk about self-harm like it's a real problem? It's not some silly attention-seeking ploy or a sign of weakness. It's a cry for help. Still, it's hard to change the system when society perpetuates the stereotypes. Hell, I heard a senior in high school call a girl a poor devil because she had cuts on her arms. How messed up is that? We're all out here struggling, trying to find our place in the world, and instead of showing empathy and understanding, we resort to name-calling and shaming. It's been years since I last cut myself, but that urge never really goes away. Every time I feel overwhelmed or hopeless, there's a little voice in my head urging me to relapse. And it's not like the world has gotten any easier to deal with. The pressures of adulthood only make things worse, but I've learned how to cope in healthier ways. Therapy, meditation, exercise, and talking to loved ones have all been lifesavers. And I'm not saying that self-harm should be normalized or encouraged, but we need to take the stigma away from it. We need to start talking about mental health so that people don't feel like they're all alone in their struggles. That's why I'm speaking up. I'm creating a platform to share my story and start a conversation about self-harm. I'm challenging the stereotypes and fighting for a world where mental health is taken seriously and people don't feel ashamed to ask for help. I'm showing people that there is hope and that there are better ways to cope with pain. We can all find strength in each other's stories and use them to help us heal. So let's start speaking up, showing compassion, and creating a world where we can all feel seen and heard. Let's make self-harm a thing of the past and start a new era of understanding and acceptance. Together, we can make a difference and build a better future for everyone.
My cancer-infected sister is dating my ex and she's begging for my forgiveness. My father married my stepsister's mother when I was 4 and she was 3. We've lived together most of our lives and are a family. She and I were extremely close. She developed cancer when she was 14 and was sick for about 2 years. She's since made a full recovery. During that time, my parents became understandably overprotective. They also asked a lot of me. I quit my extracurriculars so I could get a job, but the money wasn't even for me or my needs. It all went towards her medical bills. I even had to learn how to drive, but not to take care of myself. It was so I could drive her to appointments. I didn't go to dances and any fun activities I did needed to include her. I did almost all of this willingly, the exception being having to quit my high school volleyball team. I did throw a bit of a tantrum about that and was punished for it. And I think having one emotional breakdown was pretty chill given the circumstances. Anyhow, I go to college and meet my ex, Ben, when I'm a junior. We fall in love, blah blah. He and I move in together when we graduate, so we've been living together for about 3 years. We were serious until July when I walked into my bedroom and saw him effing my sister. I broke it off, tears were shed, he moved out, etc. My sister apologized at first but then backed off. I thought she was giving me space, but last week she called and asked if we could meet up. She told me that she and Ben were in love and were just telling me as a courtesy before they started posting photos online. Distraught, I left her in the restaurant by herself and did not pay my portion of the bill. She later Venmo'd me asking for the money. She told my parents, who then called me to their house, telling me how disappointed in me they are for not supporting my sister's relationship with Ben. They brought up the fact that because she had cancer as a teenager, she never learned proper social etiquette and has a hard time meeting people. I don't buy this, in part because I've seen her socialize just fine, and since we spent a good chunk of the time she was sick together, that would also mean that I should have bad social skills as well, by that logic. They then told me that if I don't accept my sister and Ben's relationship, they may have to go no contact with me. I reminded them that I'm also their daughter and they should understand my point of view, but they are adamant that this is about me being jealous of her. For the record, I'm not jealous of her. I'm not upset that Ben picked her over me. I'm sad about the end of the relationship and do feel betrayed, but Lord knows that I don't want to be with a cheater. What I'm upset about is the fact that my sister chose Ben over me. That she slept with Ben knowing he and I were in a long-term, committed relationship, and continues to be with him knowing how much it hurts me. Does she not know that how you get them is how you lose them? Honey, it was ruined when she bought it. Now no one in my immediate family is talking to me and I'm getting messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins telling me that I'm an a-hole and a selfish beach. Edit. I've had moments where I've been resentful or upset about my teenage years. I've always thought that I did the right thing for my sister and for my family. And that time wasn't all miserable. I was very close to my sister and we made things as fun as we could. But I didn't think of it as an abdication of my parents' responsibilities or that they were doing wrong by me, which many of you pointed out. I definitely have a lot to think about. Update, sometimes you can only laugh. Just got off of the phone with my cousin who saw this post and said he could explain a few things. He told me that after my conversation with my mom, she went to his house and talked to my aunt. Turns out my sister is not only in a relationship with Ben but 4 months pregnant. Which means she and Ben were effing for longer than I had even guessed. Apparently my parents are so adamant that I forgive her because I'm already ruining their experience of their first grandchild. That's right, I'm less important than my stepmom posting ultrasounds to Facebook. This is where we're at. I called out of work sick the rest of the day and am going to drink a lot of alcohol. Like, a lot of alcohol. And then start thinking about what the F I'm going to do. Update, I got in touch with my sister and asked her to meet up again at a park. I asked her if she was pregnant and she told me the truth. She said she wanted us to still be in each other's lives and that she wanted me to be in her baby's life. A Redditor mentioned that she may ask me to be the godmother and that person was correct. But as many of you pointed out, if I didn't cut her off, I'd just become her bank and daycare employee. So I told her I could no longer be in her life. And I left her crying on a park bench and felt like the SHTest person in the world. I emailed my parents and told them how betrayed I felt and that I'd be cutting off contact with them. To my stepmom's credit, she apologized. She explained that she never thought my sister would live to have kids and that she let her emotions get the better of her. Understandable. My dad said nothing, which is honestly what sucked the worst about all of this. Ben tried messaging me from a burner account for the first time since the breakup, but I blocked him without reading it. I didn't go nuclear and post the story to Facebook as some suggested, but I sent an email to the extended family members who I care about. I explained the situation and how I'd be distancing myself from my family. Some have made it an us versus them situation, and as much as I appreciate the support, feeling like I'm in some valiant battle just makes me more tired. So I haven't been talking to much of anyone in my family. I feel lonely and crappy, but I think I made the right decision. But, if anyone in the greater Boston area wants an extra guest at Thanksgiving, let me know.
Why do you no longer talk to your parents? When I was 17 years old, I found out my parents were actually my grandparents. Apparently my mom had me when she was 13 because she was frequently having intimacy with her stepbrother, who at the time was 18. When my grandparents found out, they were deeply disturbed and upset. At first they wanted my mom to give me up for adoption and put my dad in jail. But she worked up a deal with my grandparents. She was going to give birth to me, leave me with them, and leave the state with my father. So, that is exactly what she did. When I was about 12 years old, she and my dad came back to see me. My grandparents told me she and my dad were my second cousins who were visiting from Maryland. I believed them and spent the best 2 weeks of my life with my parents. I built a great bond with my father in those 2 weeks, and every year during the summer since I was 12, he's visited me. Until my 17th birthday. My parents came to visit us again, but this time to surprise me with an awesome gift for my 17th birthday. They gave me a German Shepherd. He was the cutest dog I've ever seen. After the dog, my mom gave me a card. I opened it and it revealed that the people who I thought were parents were actually my grandparents, and the people who I thought were my second cousins were my actual real parents. My entire life has been a lie. I was so upset when they told me this. I took my new dog, ran into my room, and locked myself in there for 2 days. Eventually I came out of my room to tell my grandparents that I was no longer going to be living with them and that I would like to never speak to them or my real parents again. It has been 5 years and I've forgiven my grandparents. I have not spoken to my real parents since that incident. My grandpa told me that they got married and had 3 more kids. I thought there was something inside my house. When I was about 17, I had gone out back to take some trash out and heard a noise in my backyard that spooked me, so I ran inside. Everyone was laughing at me until my mom thought she heard something in the basement. Then we all had the heebie-jeebies because we knew the outside door to the basement was open. My mother decided to call the cops because she was so certain of the noise she heard, which was frightening because she is always the one that says people are overreacting. After about an hour and a half, around 2 a.m., the cops still haven't arrived and we've kind of moved on since we hadn't heard anything else. We were sitting on the front porch off to the side out of the light when this car came down the block slowly, turned their lights off 2 houses down, then stopped just after passing our driveway. We all sat there for a moment afraid to move when the driver got out, retrieved something from his trunk, and took off walking down the block. At that point we decide we've had enough of this creepy night and go inside to lock the doors. The car immediately left after we got back inside, and about an hour later an officer finally showed up. We tell them everything that happened, saying we probably just heard raccoons in our backyard but that the random car was what we were worried about now. He left, we went to bed, all was quiet outside the rest of the night. The next evening around 11 or 12 my mom burst into my room saying there were a bunch of emergency vehicles outside of our house. We all go outside and of course all we can talk about is what happened the night before. After a few minutes my mom decided to walk down and talk to the news crews to see what information they had. Turns out my neighbor had a man kick in their door, shoot the husband dead, and rob the wife. My best friend's wife told him that she had an affair with me, which never happened. The last 4 days have been the most horrible in my life. I, 35 male, have been married to my wife, 35 female, for 8 years. We have 2 wonderful kids. But, this is about my friend Josh, 35 male, and his wife Mary, 34 female. I met Josh during my freshman year of college and we have been friends ever since. We have always shared our love for tech and he is always my go-to guy when I need someone to talk to. Josh started dating Mary 5 years ago. Let's just say Mary has a very different set of morals than my wife or me. She is very loud, manipulative, and just craves attention. Josh and Mary had been dating on and off for 4 years. They broke up often, but somehow always ended up together after a few months. Mary is always the one who breaks up with Josh and then takes him back. I also know that Mary cheated on Josh at least with 2 guys when they were dating, but somehow convinced him that he was not putting enough effort into the relationship. Josh always blames himself when Mary is not happy. My wife also knows about all of this and has always kept her distance from Mary. However, we do meet her often during parties with friends. Josh and Mary got married last year. Last month, Josh found out that Mary was cheating on him again and had an affair with one of her co-workers. Josh was completely broken and stayed at our place for a week, before going back and confronting Mary and kicking her out of the house. Josh bought the house before marriage, and hence he had to get the cops involved to kick her out. From what we know, Mary moved back to her parents' house. I have been helping Josh through the process and he filed for divorce last week. Last Saturday, Mary came to Josh's house to collect her stuff along with her dad. I had advised Josh to get out of the house when they came, but he wanted to make sure she did not take anything that did not belong to her. During her visit, Josh got into a fight with Mary, and Mary told Josh that she had an affair with me while they were married and we used to do it in their bedroom. This is all 100% false. I have always known that Mary was trouble and kept my distance from her. I feel she is just trying to hurt Josh by saying that. After that incident, Josh got extremely agitated and came to our house. I saw he was distressed and knew something was wrong. As I opened the door, he started cursing at me and accusing me of sleeping with Mary. Luckily, the kids were not at home, but my wife and I were there and we were both shocked by what he was saying. He tried to punch me, but luckily he hit my shoulder and I was able to wrestle him on the ground and calm him down. I kept on telling him that what Mary told him was completely false and that I had never spent a single minute with her alone in my life. My wife threatened to call the cops and he left. After he left, my wife was completely inconsolable. It took me hours to calm her down and convince her that Mary was manipulating Josh. I work from home and rarely leave my house without my wife or kids. I think she believes me, but she has been different for the last 4 days. Josh told a lot of my close friends that I was having an affair with Mary. He is not taking my calls or my wife's calls. My wife tried to call Mary, but she was also not taking our calls. All my friends, including Josh, think that I am the biggest jerk for getting involved with his wife. I have no idea how to convince anyone that this is false. I am just so frustrated. Can someone please give me advice on what I can do next? Update. First of all, thanks to everyone who suggested that we should file for defamation. I just kept on thinking in my head how I could get Mary to tell the truth and convince Josh that I had completely forgotten the legal route. I was not able to update as the lawyers had told us not to say anything until we got a confession from Mary. After posting on Reddit, my wife and I spent a few hours at night reading through all the comments. We immediately decided to explore whether we could sue Mary for defamation. Some of you suggested that I should take a polygraph test. I asked my wife if we should find a place for that and she smiled. She said she does not doubt me one bit, but we can't let people have any doubt that I had an affair with Mary. Our kids are friends with their kids, and we can't live with them thinking I had an affair with Mary. She just wanted us to be strong and solve the issue as soon as possible. In the morning, we messaged my wife's mother's friend, who is a very experienced attorney. We called her based on the time she gave us in the morning and explained the issue. She said that we should pursue the legal route, but she does not handle such cases and gave us the contact of another attorney in her firm and set up a meeting with her at noon. We went to visit her and discuss the issue. The lawyer told us that we could sue Mary as she has made false accusations and there is a precedent of considering what she said as slander, as it attacked my character and we can prove emotional distress. However, she told us that a defamation lawsuit is a very long and expensive process and may take several years. She told us that Mary has a weak hand and she will not want to go to court. Hence, we should give her a way out by telling her to give in writing that what she said was false. Moreover, as she said the false statement to Josh, we would need Josh to state what she said. I won't go into details here but might post it in the comments later on. However, we came up with a plan for sending her a letter of intent to sue for defamation. The attorney worked on this and we got notified that Mary received the letter on Friday morning at her parents' place. The letter told her that we would sue her by the end of the month if she did not provide an official statement in writing that the statements she had made were false. The letter also told Mary to only communicate via the law firm regarding this matter. As planned, I messaged Josh and told him we had decided to sue Mary for defamation due to the false statements she made about the affair. We would leave no stone unturned to prove that the allegations are false. Our lawyers will contact you next week and we hope you cooperate with them and tell them exactly what she said to you. On Saturday morning, as I was cooking breakfast and my wife was sitting with our kids, the doorbell rang. I saw the Ring camera of Josh and Mary standing outside the door. Before I could tell my wife to stay back and not open the door, she bolted towards the door. She opened it and started yelling at Josh. She is 5'0" tall, but she is scary when she is angry. She just started calling him names and how can he destroy our lives when we supported him at his lowest? Josh just kept saying, he just wanted to talk to me and kept repeating that. He looked down. My wife just kept on yelling at him and telling him to get lost. Mary started talking then, saying that she was sorry for what she said. Josh was abusing her as she was packing, and she just said that to hurt him. She just kept on saying that Josh is such an idiot and has created such a big mess. My wife turned to her and told her that she better find a good lawyer, to reply to our lawyers. At last, she told Josh that if he wanted to meet me, go and first make things right for me and then slam the door. I was watching all this from the breakfast table through the Ring camera and realized that we recorded the whole conversation including Mary confessing her lies. I felt so relieved in the moment knowing that I had proof of her telling the truth. We forwarded the video to our lawyer, and she sent a thumbs up and called us briefly to say that we should meet on Monday to discuss the next steps. After an hour or so, Josh messaged our friends group that he did a terrible thing and spread false statements about me. He is ashamed of it and wants to apologize for it. Moments later, Mary messaged saying that some statements she made were misconstrued by Josh and that what he told everyone was false. Their relationship is going through rocking times and would thank everyone for giving them privacy and to pray for them. The rest of the day has been great. I have been taking my kids to their Saturday activities, and playing with them, while my wife was talking on the phone with all my friends' wives and her friends gossiping about what happened. The only thing I told her was to not send the Ring video of Josh and me from last week and not to mention Mary's affair to them. I still think it's a private matter that Josh told us in confidence, and we should respect that. Everyone was shocked that Josh attacked me physically. Regarding my friends, I made a blanket statement that they all hate me in the last post. But, in reality, 4 of my friends called me during this week to ask me what was going on. They told me they knew how crazy Mary was and asked me how they could support me. One of the friends was the one that Josh had called. He told me that Josh told him that Mary had an affair with me and he had filed for divorce. He conveniently left out the part about her cheating on her coworker. I don't think anyone apart from my wife and I know the whole story. He knows at least 2 of the other friends Josh called and said the same. Due to this, the gossip started spreading that they were divorcing because of me and most of my friends were just waiting on the sidelines instead of extending support to me. However, I think I learned who are the people that got my back in need. About Josh, we still plan to file for TRO against him and Mary next week. The lawyer said we should be able to get it for Josh as there is clear evidence of danger, but Mary might be a long shot. We will see what to do from there. As for our friendship, it's done. It ended the minute he decided to punch me, instead of at least asking me if it was true. I can't have people like him around my wife and kids. He was a great friend, but my family and their safety have a way higher priority than him. For Mary, I guess she wins. My wife still wants to push to get her to pay our legal fees. We will see what to do on Monday. However, she was able to destroy Josh's support system with one lie. I was helping Josh through the whole divorce process. But, he is on his own now. I also do not think many of my friends would be kind to him after the crap he tried to do at my house. I feel bad for him and I know he needs support and professional help. However, I did my part and I hope he understands what's right for him in the future. Thanks again for so many helpful comments. My wife also wants to thank all of you and I am glad that this is over now. I think I unalived my grandma. I'm around 8 weeks old with my husband and I first. We aren't telling anyone until after the first trimester, though we did tell my mom when we found out since she is like my best friend. My grandma has a degenerative disease and for the past year or so it's been really bad. She can no longer move on her own, use the restroom by herself, talk, eat, drink, or see, and she is on 24/7 hospice care at her home. All this to say, we have been waiting on her to pass for the last year, but it's just been dragging on. Last week, we got the news that her kidneys were beginning to shut down. My mom and family have been going to visit with her and say their goodbyes. Unfortunately, I live on the other side of the country, and my doctor recommended against flying back due to the stress of the environment on my still early pregnancy. So I gave my mom permission to tell her about the baby, at her discretion. I know it's kind of odd for the situation, but I thought it might give my grandma a silver lining through a hard time. My mom originally said she couldn't, because everyone was over and she couldn't tell her without our whole family overhearing. But yesterday my mom called me, and said she had gotten some alone time in her room and whispered it to her. She said she got this little smile, which is a really big deal for her condition, and it was a sweet moment. My mom called me again this morning, as I was puking from morning sickness. Turns out my grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep last night. And it's bittersweet. And it has me so emotional, because we have been expecting her to pass for a year now. She herself has been expecting to pass for a year now. And yet she passes away the night after we tell her she's going to be a great grandma. It hurts she will never get to meet them, but I know from that smile she felt love for them, and although I couldn't be there, I feel like I gave her the best farewell I could. I hope she thought so, too. Edit, the end of this paragraph sounds terrible and emotionless, but her quality of life was so diminished. Before she lost her ability to talk, she was telling us she just wanted to die already because she was embarrassed by her care and felt like a burden. My heart absolutely hurts, but we are so relieved she is finally free. What ruins SX life in a marriage? I've got a story that will make you cringe, gasp, and maybe even vomit a little bit. It all started when my friend, let's call him Tom, got into a serious relationship with a woman we'll call Sarah. At first, everything seemed great. They were in love, they had an active and exciting SX life, and they were talking about getting married. But then, things took a turn. Sarah became obsessed with being the one in control of everything, including the SX. She refused to let Tom take the lead, insisting on being on top every time they had SX. She also would never orgasm, claiming that only she knew how to get herself off. Tom tried to talk to her about his needs and desires, but she brushed him off, telling him that if he truly loved her, he would let her have her way. Things got even worse when she started bringing other women into the mix, insisting that Tom watch as she pleasured them. But that wasn't the worst of it. Oh no, it gets so much worse. One day, Tom came home early from work to find Sarah in bed with his own father. That's right, folks, his effing father. And Sarah didn't even seem embarrassed or ashamed. Instead, she taunted Tom, saying that she was better in bed than his own mother ever was. Tom was devastated, of course. He broke up with Sarah, kicked his father out of the house, and tried to move on with his life. But the damage had been done. He couldn't trust anyone anymore, and he couldn't enjoy SX without feeling sick to his stomach. So, there you have it. The story of how an egotistic bitch battle cunt ruined a man's SX life and shattered his trust in the people he loved. It's a cautionary tale, folks. Be careful who you let into your bed, and always listen to your gut. My sister attacked my wife, and my mom is holding our financial documents hostage because of it. My wife and I have been together since December 2019. Ever since then, we have had nothing but problems with my family, particularly my mom and my one sister, as well as occasionally my brother, sister-in-law, and dad. My wife and I have talked multiple times in the past few years about whether we feel like it has gotten to the point of us needing to go no contact, but haven't pulled the trigger quite yet. This past weekend, however, and the aftermath, are having us seriously consider it. My wife and I were asked to help with a home project for my brother and sister-in-law's new house. The only supplies that were brought for said project was one single paint sprayer, and one single roll of painting tape, even though we had 7 people at various points who were there to help. My wife, my mom, my sister-in-law, and I started taping up the parts that needed covering, and my brother started painting behind us. There wasn't a whole lot to tape, so once we finished there wasn't anything to do other than sit around and wait. Eventually my sister starts painting, and my wife and I decide around 7 p.m. that it would probably be smart to try to order food for everyone. My wife is with one group on one side of the year talking about food orders, and I am on the other side with my mom and sister. My wife heard them yelling, and was concerned that something was happening, so she came over and asked what was going on. Here is a play-by-play of this conversation. Sister, hands me paint sprayer, your turn. Me, oh, okay, I thought I was supposed to go get food? Sister, too bad. Mom, I did ask you to help paint. Me, well, I did help tape. Mom, well, I didn't ask you to help tape, I asked you to help paint, didn't I? Me, I suppose. Wife, what are you guys yelling about? Mom, oh, we were just giving him crap. Wife, oh, okay, it just sounded like yelling. Sister, he can talk to his family, without you. It's none of your effing business. Wife, huh? Sister, you have no right to be a effing beach to my mom. It's none of your business, and he can talk to his family without you around. Wife, I was just asking a question about my husband. Is there a problem with that? Sister, you don't get to talk to my mom like that, you beach. Wife, again, I was asking a simple question about my husband. Sister takes a couple steps towards wife. Wife walks towards sister. Sister is literally centimeters from wife's face. Wife places her hand on sister's chest and tells her to back off, and then sister starts swinging. Basically, my sister started swinging on my wife, and my wife put her hands up to block her face and accidentally landed a blow on my sister in the face. After this, I pulled my sister back, and my wife stepped back. My sister was yelling things like she hurt me, call the cops, etc. After my sister eventually seemed to calm down, I let her go, and she lunged at my wife again, and this time got a swing in. I pulled her back again, and then my brother and sister-in-law walked up and started yelling at my wife. Sister-in-law says that my wife is making them look like trash to their new neighbors, and my brother tells us to get off his property. My mom started yelling at my wife, telling her she was being a bitch, and that she had no right to come at her like that, even though my wife hadn't even moved yet from the spot where she was standing. Fast forward. Over the past few days we have gotten many text messages and phone calls. The gist of those is basically continuing to blame my wife, and telling me that I am a terrible brother, son, and uncle. Additionally, we need some old tax forms for some financial paperwork we need to fill out, and while my wife's parents sent those to us as soon as they were able, my parents are holding them hostage and flat out refusing to give them to us. I was told that I would have to drive an hour to their house to retrieve them, and have a conversation with my mom, and that my wife was not welcome to this conversation. Additionally, my wife is no longer welcome in their house. When we called and asked if my mom could please just email them to us, we need them, her exact response was maybe. Withholding our financial documents feels like it should be a last straw for me, but it's really hard, and I want to make the right choice. Accidentally burned down my neighbor's fence and she tries to milk me for $10,000. Judge humbles that ass up real quick. This sub has gotten me through a lot of boredom and has provided me with hours of entertainment. I figure it's my turn to tell my revenge story. So it's been about 4 years since this happened. I was about 18 at the time, working for a security company. There were constant call-offs and no-shows, have no idea why, but being so young and naive, I was constantly working 16-hour shifts and not coming home until 8 a.m. Also, I lived with my father at the time. The time frame of this was around the 4th of July. I finally had a day off and my best friend was back in town for vacation. We decided to get together and chip in on some good old American fireworks. To be fair, I have had nothing but bad experiences with fireworks, so I had no idea how this would be any different. We got home with the fireworks and we laid them all out on the floor. Sparklers, bottle rockets, cakes, and Roman candles. I say, why don't we mess around with some sparklers since it's still not dark yet? Great idea. We go into my backyard, where it hasn't rained in well over 2 months and it is extremely dry. You see the problem here? One of the little sparkies from mine and my friend's sparkler made contact with the ground and made it 2 small fires that quickly spread to a large area. I ran as fast as I could to grab the garden hose and quickly started spraying down the fire. It was no use, it was spreading faster than I could spray it. I handed my friend the hose and called 911. What felt like hours was only 4 minutes and the fire was spreading to the neighbor's fence. The neighbor came outside and they were fairly calm to grab their hose and spray down the fence, along with the dead grass in her yard. The fire department shows up finally and I tell my friend only one of us needs to get in trouble, you should leave. He was reluctant to leave because he felt equally responsible, but I convinced him. I didn't want him to get in trouble and have to drop out of college. My neighbor was super chill about the entire situation at first. I told her that we could talk about replacing the fence and get some quotes to repair it. She was just super grateful that everyone was okay. About 2 hours after the fire, the arson/fire investigator came to question me about the fire. I told him the truth. I said I was in the backyard by myself playing with fireworks and accidentally lit the ground on fire. I had gotten off that day without being hit by any charges and was commended for being honest. Here is where it goes downhill very fast. About a week later I get a knock on the door from the neighbor. I opened the door and she handed me 2 pieces of paper for me to look at. There was a quote for the fence valued at around $4,000 and an estimate for lawn care valued around $6,000. These were really shady and just typed out on a Microsoft Word document. No logo or company name. She then adds, I will also be having you pay my water bill for 3 months because the new yard will need lots of water. Now the fence this woman had before was raggedy and falling apart. Her yard? Dead grass, weeds everywhere, never mowed it. Now looking at this paper she wants a mahogany fence, and a brand new backyard with flowers and trimmed hedges? I said I need to get an estimate myself, this doesn't feel right. She says remember you agreed to replace my fence, and a real man keeps promises. I shut the door and called my dad to tell him about what just happened. He flipped the F out and told me, son, don't you give that slut a single dime. He gives me the number to his handyman and tells me to take care of it. The next day I had the guy come out for an estimate, and the neighbor ran outside flailing her arms. I did not give you permission to get an estimate on my fence. Technically it separates the property line, so it's both of our fences. She calls the cops on me for having a contractor, and they ultimately can't do a single thing because I'm on my property. He quickly finishes the estimate off at $1,200. I also knew a guy who did lawn care, from my time working at the grocery store. He estimated the lawn reseeding while she was away from the house to be about $800. After I get these estimates I give copies to the woman and she is having none of it. I don't know these people, I don't want them near my house. They're probably really shitty contractors. I said no, I know them personally, they are really nice people and do great work. She shut the door in my face and I went on my way. I ended up working a 16-hour shift that night and got home at 8 a.m. And this woman comes knocking on my door at 9 a.m. and demanded I speak to her. I explained, I would really love to do this, but I just got home and I have to be back at work in less than 5 hours. I need to sleep. She goes, what kind of lazy asshat sleeps in until 2 p.m.? At this point I had about lost it, and told her you can either accept my $2,000 for my quotes or kiss my ass and get nothing. She stood there for a while with her mouth gaped open, but she accepted my offer and planned to meet down at the notary the next morning. I spent that night after I got off work, writing a contract and gathering the $2,000 in cash. The next morning I wake up, and grab this contract to meet down at the notary. I was thrilled to finally be done with this broad, and never speak to her again. I waited for her for over 3 hours and she didn't show up. I get a call from her saying, I'm sorry, the $2,000 isn't enough. I'm having my guys start work on this project, and you will be paying me full price. Oh really? After that, I did not say a single word to her, and I watched for a few months as these guys turned her backyard into an oasis, complete with a small pond, brand new sod and flowers, the whole 9 yards. Come to find out, she had plans to remodel these things for a long time, and was just waiting for the opportunity to go through with it. Also, in this time, she used her remodel funds to go on a trip to Hawaii. You know how I found out about this? She was bragging about it on the neighborhood Facebook group, and didn't know I was in it. I have a different Facebook name than my real name. Are you ready for the revenge? Now, 4 months after the fire and all the remodels, I get served papers to go to court for $10,300. At 18 years old, I'm having to hire a lawyer to work my case. When we finally do get into court, I lay everything out. The quotes: being harassed multiple times, not showing up after agreeing to a deal, not wanting me to get my own quotes, required by law BTW, and her bragging about screwing me out of money, and I have proof of all of this. The judge looked at her and said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're out of your daggum mind. Not only did this young man tell the truth of what happened, he offered to pay you more than he was supposed to. Your lawn was already dead before the fire occurred, therefore he is only responsible for the fence of $1,200. I will also deduct from this his lawyer fees, $800. So I burned this woman's fence down and all I'm having to give her is $400? Cool." She took a huge financial loss from this, not sure how much the Hawaii trip cost her, but she was in serious debt. She ended up having to sell the house because of it and moved into a smaller house. Haven't heard anything from her since. What would you do if you found a glory hole? I'm straight, but I'm spending this Valentine's Day alone after my divorce and I haven't had intimacy in almost a year. Divorce was finalized 4 months ago. Well, I've been really horny and lonely, so I decided to see if glory holes were real and not just a corn myth. After some scouring of the web, I found a supposed location of one in a local adult video store and a code phrase to access it, and apparently it was free and just for fun. I decided to take a shot with it because why the hell not? I went there and awkwardly said the code phrase to the cashier. She said, "Oh, right this way," and led me to their viewing booths. She opened the door to a booth that had a closed for maintenance sign on it. The room next to it had the same sign. I went in and she said, "Have fun." There was random glory hole corn playing on the TV in there and of course a hole in the wall. I was anxious and the thought of there being a dude freaked me out, so I didn't peek to see what was on the other side. As I unzipped, I saw a tongue come through the hole and wiggle around a bit, then back out. Someone was definitely there. I felt like I'd come too far and I was super horny. I went over and put my meat and balls through the hole, and almost immediately a hand grabbed me and started rubbing lube on me and stroking me. Eventually, after I got hard from their hands, they started sucking. Honestly, they gave me the best blow I've ever experienced. Eventually, after maybe 10 minutes, I knew I was going to nut. Apparently the etiquette for this is you knock on the wall, so I knocked and I felt their hand squeezing my balls and my entire meat was swallowed as I came. They kept sucking for a long time and I felt my eyes cross. Finally, they finished and kissed my tip, so I pulled back. After catching my breath and collecting myself, dealing with the post-nut clarity and shame, I zipped up and left the room. On my way out, I saw the cashier again. She smiled, waved and said, "Come again. What are you still salty about?" My parents bought my brother a guitar for Christmas. He learned 2 chords over a few weeks, then when he realized it would take actual effort to learn, he quit and it went into a corner of his room and just started gathering dust. A few years later, when I was about 9 years old, I decided I wanted to learn the guitar, so I borrowed it, restrung it, and started learning. By an amazing coincidence, around the same time my brother decided the guitar was now his prized possession. And by a further amazing coincidence, he only ever felt the urge to practice whenever I wanted to use the guitar. One day, I'd saved up my money for a couple of months and bought myself a Beatles songbook. I got it home and went and grabbed the guitar. Of course, my brother suddenly decides he needs to play a C chord over and over, so I protest to my parents. I'm using the guitar, he only wants it to stop me using it. He hadn't touched it in 3 years until I got interested. I was the one who paid to have the guitar set up and paid for the strings, so can they please just make him leave me alone for a freaking hour so I can try out some of the songs in my new songbook? They'd tell me, no. That it's my brother's guitar, it belongs to him, so I have to give it to him. Now, this is the part I'm still really effing salty about. I give the guitar to him, and he asks to borrow my new songbook. I tell him to F right off. So he whines to my parents and they make me lend it to him. Because after all, I can't do anything with it without a guitar. Yeah, it's my brother's guitar, it belongs to him, so I have to give it to him. It's my songbook, it belongs to me, but suddenly none of that counts and I should be reasonable. Part that makes me even saltier. I asked for my own guitar for Christmas and was told no because we spent hundreds on one for your brother and he never learned it. We're not making that mistake again.
I accidentally showed up to my cousin's engagement party wearing an identical dress as her. Now her friends hate me and I'm terrified of being uninvited from the wedding. My cousin is getting married soon and our families have not been in contact with each other for the last 12 years due to some issues between our fathers, who hated each other. The feud recently came to an end because all the kids are grown up now, and we kind of want to keep our differences aside. We even had a little reunion, but the issue started with my cousin's engagement party. I wore a nice beautiful peach-colored gown, which had been gifted to me 3 years ago. We are Indians and brides generally prefer to wear lehengas or saris. Even though we have reconciled as a family, my sister never involved me with her planning or anything related to her wedding, which I was okay with. When we arrived at the location of the event, all was good. People from the groom's side welcomed us nicely and I was feeling great. Except that the bride arrived 2 hours late. To my horror, she was wearing a peach-colored gown exactly like mine, but more glittery. Only the bottom part of our dress was slightly different. She went on without acknowledging my existence, but the tension was so obvious. My mom noticed and told me to relax because it was just an accident. I went to enjoy the party by talking with my other cousin, but only 5 minutes into our conversation, the bride's best friend came to talk. I thought she was there to invite me to join them, but she straight up told me to change my dress. I was speechless. I told her no because there wasn't anything else to wear and my house was very far away, to the point where it would take me 2 hours to change and come back. She suggested I buy a new dress or she could lend me some clothes. I firmly told her no and she argued until she gave up. Everyone was pretty much unaware of this happening and my cousin looked really happy. When the ceremony started, she was looking fine and smiled at me. I was glad this wasn't being taken out of proportion because at the end of the day, she was getting engaged to the love of her life. We both got lots of compliments from the guests, though I was trying to keep a low profile because I really didn't want to update my cousin. Since she didn't bring it up, I thought the drama was over, even though her friends kept eyeing me throughout the entire wedding. One of them even contacted me to gloat about there being an after-party thrown by the bride and groom for all the cousins and their special friends, but I wasn't invited. She sent pictures and said I was a beach for trying to be better than the bride, so they didn't invite me. I tried to explain that I had no idea we would be matching, but she blocked me before I even finished typing. I was worried that my cousin felt this weak because there had been a competition between us since childhood to look better than each other, which was really childish and created more issues in our family. I'm pretty sure we moved past that, but I'm not sure how she feels about it now. Then, things got weird. My cousin's mom called my mom to tell her that I would be beside the bride on stage during the wedding. My jaw dropped because it was like being the maid of honor. I was really happy though and quickly texted my cousin to thank her and we talked for the first time after her engagement. It was really nice to catch up with her about our lives and families. We even decided to meet up for a coffee. At the coffee shop, I brought up the topic of our matching dress, and she told me she was shocked at first but later totally forgot about it. I still apologized though and she said it was fine. I also asked her why she was choosing me over her friends to be on stage and she said they're not punctual, are irresponsible, can be very demanding, and I am literally her family. I thanked her again for that and she went on to say she was a bit disappointed that I wasn't there at the afterparty and her soon-to-be husband was also asking for me. From her talk, one thing I know is that she is not aware about her friends being mean to me and lying about me. I decided not to tell her about it because I just want both of us to enjoy her wedding without any further drama, and we are both on really good terms, which is all I wanted.
I found out that my loving wife bought a lingerie a few months ago without telling me. I confronted her and learned the truth. My wife and I have been married for 6 years and together for 10. We have 2 children, and my wife is a stay-at-home mom. So a couple of days ago, I was digging around our closet and our wardrobe for my wrist sleeves which I had lost. I really wanted to find these sleeves so I dug the entire place up, and luckily found the sleeves. However, whilst searching, I also found a hidden set of lingerie. It clearly wasn't a gift because the box had been opened, and the lingerie was outside the box. Now my wife has full liberty to purchase whatever she wants, and I usually never track what she purchases. However, for this particular item, I went through my credit card history to check for when that specific brand name purchase was made, and it was made 5 months ago. Update, I was definitely wrong to overreact, and I'm really glad I came on here to get opinions first. So the day after I posted, I casually asked my wife about the lingerie I found, and she was actually excited about it, and said she had bought 3 more sets which she had hidden, and she was planning to surprise me on our wedding anniversary, which is in a week. She said she had brought these sets on Black Friday last year. She was blushing about it. It was hilarious. I know I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this, but I completely forgot that our wedding anniversary was just a week away. I've been extremely busy with work, and I'm not the best at dates, so I'm actually really glad about this divine intervention, because I can now plan a proper wedding anniversary for my wife. Update, am I the jerk for wearing a wedding dress to a wedding? Since they blocked me on everything, I didn't try to reach out since it would be a waste of effort, but I didn't block them back. If they wanted to talk I was fine with it. 2 days ago I was unblocked by my friend. She asked if we could call and talk about what happened and I agreed. She apologized for blowing up at me like she did, but also told me she was still upset. I was only made aware because of the comments and now her, that wearing wedding attire to anything wedding related is common sense. All I knew was no white on the wedding day. Honestly, after people informed me, I felt awful and downright stupid. So I apologized back for not running it through her like I should have since I didn't know. I know lots of people were telling me to cut her off, but I've known her since I was 14 so I'm glad we can stay friends. Her husband on the other hand, he had told her that he came up to me and asked me to change, and apparently I told him it didn't matter because I was already there, or something along those lines. She was crying a lot while telling me. After she blew up at me and I told her the real story, she got pissed at her husband. The husband suggested both of them block me so the fight would stop. She agreed to it but was still upset by it all. Eventually she started asking people who were at the wedding to see what happened. 3 people saw me walk up to him and heard me ask. This is where she learned her husband lied to her. Again, a huge fight between the two. Turns out he's hated me since I met them 5 years ago. They had already been dating for a year beforehand. I became good friends with her but not with him. He felt as though I was trying to take his girlfriend. I don't know what I did to make him feel this way. She's beautiful but I'd never do that SHT to anyone. I don't know why he'd wait 5 years but he decided the day of his wedding was the best time to get rid of me. I'm not really sure what's going to happen to them in the future. She's staying at another friend's house until she and her husband are able to talk about it. Edit, my friend is doing a lot better and plans to talk to her husband soon. I've also shown her my post since I felt like she had a right to know. Some comments made her quite upset, but she knows she overreacted. My friend's emotions are always intense, but she tries her best to keep them under control. She's seen people talk about the red flags in her husband but isn't sure what to do. She told me she'll decide based on what he does when they talk about it. I'll support her no matter what she decides. Even if he rubs me the wrong way and I have my own opinion on what she would do, it's up to her. She's an amazing person and I just want her to be happy. Second update. My friend has told me I can post this if I wanted to and I thought why not. My friend did try to work things out with her husband, but she started getting fed up with how he treated her. They had gone to a restaurant for a date, had an argument and he told her she had to walk home at 8 p.m. It was a half an hour walk. Instead of going back to hers, she called up a friend. It was her final straw. She decided to apply for annulment and they've broken up. Her ex tried to convince her to think about it more. He's once again blaming me and her friends for putting crazy ideas in her brain. Safe to say we've all blocked him. She has been upset over it all, but she's also excited to experience single life. She's been dating him since they were 14, so she's never had certain experiences. She told us she wasn't even sure if she ever loved him like she thought she did. It's all been quite a lot. I feel like we've become better friends because of all of this. She's been able to go clubbing with us and has gone home with some people. The legal age for drinking here is 18. I feel like she's actually getting to live out her young adult life without feeling tied down. We have been looking out for her since she doesn't know certain things and making sure she isn't reckless. If she gets really drunk, we make sure we don't take our eyes off of her. She looks way more alive figuring out who she really is and I couldn't be more proud of her. She's also been planning another party as a celebration to her new future. She's asked me to help make her into Emily from The Corpse Bride so we can both go as it for this party. This time I'll definitely be getting loads of photos. I won't post them though for privacy reasons again. What's your story of seeing somebody's mental state degrade? When I was about 15 I made friends in high school with a girl I really liked. We got on great, spoke outside of school and spoke a lot when we had classes together. She was very popular, very attractive and had a great sense of humor. One day she stopped turning up to school, no one knew why and we couldn't get in contact with her. Eventually her form tutor told his students what was going on and that got around school. She was put in hospital with anorexia. She was allowed out on weekends and I would always go and see her when I could. She was still herself at this time, just struggling. Fast forward a few years, she was still in and out of hospital and a lot worse now, out once a month for home visits and I would see her then, and this is when I started to see her as a shell of a human being. She was no longer the girl I knew. She just seemed empty and not there. At one time we went to an amusement park together and she had to eat at very specific times. We had just come off a roller coaster and I didn't feel like eating at all, and because of this she just broke down and even phoned her mom and told on me for not eating. We spoke a lot still over text and got very close. I always thought she would eventually get better and be able to live a normal life. We planned a future together, spoke about having kids and pets. A few more years went by and she got even worse. She would always talk about not being able to do it anymore and how she had lost all her friends. We were never dating, but I eventually moved on and got another girlfriend. At the time the relationship was new and I didn't want anything to ruin it. I backed off from messaging how we used to. She reached out a few times after and I ignored her. Around a year ago she ended up taking her life in hospital. When I first read about it I was in shock. I didn't think it would affect me, but it did and still does. It constantly tears me up inside.
My insecure boyfriend wants me to turn down an offer for my dream job. Please help. I always thought my relationship was different. I was so sure for such a long time that we would end up together forever. But now I'm doubting all the stability that I thought I had in life with my boyfriend. I'm a 24-year-old art student, and I met my boyfriend about 2 years ago when I first started college. We have sort of an unconventional connection, and when we got together a lot of people said they were surprised we were dating. I am a very artsy, passionate person and my boyfriend is more logical and analytical. He had his master's in computer science and a great job in Silicon Valley. He is the sweetest man I've ever met, and before all this, he treated me like a queen. I am still in college, and I work part-time as well as going to an internship 2 days a week. I had a busy schedule, and my boyfriend has been incredibly supportive up until now. For context, I know it might sound silly, but it's my dream to become a professional runway model. I have done paid modeling gigs before, but I work on my walk every day and I study fashion magazines every night until my eyes burn. I am totally obsessed with the fashion world, and I have this delusional feeling that I truly will make it, no matter how unbelievable it sounds. Anyway, I was over the moon last week when I was reached out to by a top-of-the-line modeling agency that was based in NYC. It was the most prestigious and high-paying contract offer I had ever been given, and I cried when I read the email. I would be walking for luxury fashion brands, and I thought it would be years before I would get an opportunity like this. I called my boyfriend with happy tears in my eyes after I read the email. He congratulated me on the phone, but he sounded a little low energy? He just didn't match my excitement and asked me if we could talk later since I was busy. We hung up, and I spent the rest of the day ecstatic with a big dumb smile on my face. I responded to the email of course, and I had my first job set up for 2 weeks later. Fast forward to that night at my boyfriend's apartment. As soon as I walked in I could tell he was in a sad mood. He was being quiet, and he generally seemed to be in a very low mood, so I asked him what the matter was. He just looked up at me and asked if I was going to leave him. I told him of course not, and I asked him where this was coming from. My boyfriend's eyes welled up as he spoke, and he explained to me that he wanted me to turn down the job, but please hear him out. Before this, I thought my boyfriend was supportive of my dreams. Walking the runway during Fashion Week is the main thing I talk about, and he knows what his dream means to me. That's why I was shocked and upset when he started losing his reasons for wanting me to turn down the biggest contract I have ever been extended. He told me that he was uncomfortable with me doing nude or revealing runways, and he didn't want everything staring at his half-naked girlfriend. He already sounded ridiculous before launching into another rant about how it was a toxic space, and how he was comfortable with me being around other male models. I had done plenty of modeling jobs before, and my boyfriend had never reacted like this. This was the first time he was revealing any of these insecurities, and he was 100% serious as he spoke. He finished by saying that he wanted me to choose between him or my contract, and that if I really cared about him I would make an effort to understand where he was coming from. He said it was already hard for him when we could go out in public and men stare at me, and that he couldn't handle that at a professional level. I just sunk into the couch. I cried because I couldn't believe what my partner was saying. But as soon as he had finished talking, I knew our relationship was dead in the water. I love my boyfriend, I did, but any man that makes me choose between him and my dream career is no man of mine. I tried to be as kind and gentle as possible when I explained to my boyfriend that there was no way I was turning down this opportunity that I had waited my entire life for. I told him my industry was difficult and this might be my big break, and I couldn't afford to give it up. He got upset and asked if I was leaving him. I asked him if he really expected me to choose, and he gave me an angry yes. I just repeated myself and told him I felt he was wrong to make me choose, and that we could have worked on his insecurities together, but now I was leaving and I wouldn't be looking back. I was hurt as he called me names when I got my stuff together and left his apartment, but looking back now I realized I dropped dead weight.
One time my phone went off during the ACT, but the good news is I had set my ringtone as a recording of me sniffing and clearing my throat. Nobody suspected a thing. This is proof that standardized tests don't measure intelligence, because that was smart as heck and I got a 12. Why on earth would this be your ringtone?
What is your most traumatizing family-related experience? My father passed away years ago. My dad was an extremely rich entrepreneur who owned several tech startups and companies, and in his will, he left the vast majority of his wealth, and all of his tech startups, to me alone. I have 2 younger brothers, and compared to me, they pretty much got nothing from my dad in their inheritance. So, in the immediate days after my dad died, there was significant controversy regarding my dad's will in my family. My brothers were absolutely livid with jealousy that I was the one who got all of dad's startups, and there were a lot of reasons as to why I got the best of my dad's wealth in my inheritance. One of them was that I was his firstborn child, and also because I was the eldest child in the family and had proven myself to be more than responsible with the types of things my dad was bequeathing to me. However, on the other hand, my younger brothers were so irresponsible about everything, that they had barely gotten out of their very chronic substance addictions by the time my dad died. So, the point is that my dad left most of his worldly riches to me in his will, and my younger brothers hated me for it, and they thought it was unfair, and they both brought this issue up very unceremoniously at my dad's funeral. They directly confronted me about it right at the funeral, creating a huge scene about the whole thing, and they said that I had to do something to make dad's will more equal for everyone. I patently refused, of course, and told them to at least leave this shamelessness out of my dad's funeral. My brothers still kept raging and being aggressively all in my face. However, even though I tried my level best to calm things down, but things escalated regardless, and in a fit of rage, I screamed and pushed both my brothers away from me really hard. That caused my youngest brother to throw a knife right at me in the middle of the funeral. The knife struck me on the side of my head, and the entire funeral basically descended to chaos after that, and it was practically ruined. After the funeral, my brothers kept very viciously and shamelessly fighting me on the issue of the will over the next couple of days. We 3 lived in the same apartment. They even bitterly fought among themselves about who deserved what portion of the will, and it deeply saddened me to see this disgraceful sibling rivalry unfold. My brothers kept aggressively urging me to give them some of my inheritance, and I still flatly refused, because neither of them had the qualities and maturity to handle the inheritance. Anyway, after I was persistent in my refusal, my brothers began literally harassing and bullying me in our own home, alienating me, giving me pushes and shoves out of nowhere, and just acting as though I, their big sister, was their worst enemy. I even started feeling afraid of being in my own home because of my brothers, and it was one of the darkest periods of my life. I started fearing for my life, because I seriously thought that my brothers would murder me one day so they could get my inheritance. That's how ferocious my brothers seemed to obtain my dad's startups and wealth. But then, just when I thought my brothers could get no more drunk with greed, things took an even darker turn. One evening, I was feeling particularly scared of the possibility of my brothers doing something to hurt me, so I called a friend of mine to stay the night with me. She came to me after my brothers were asleep, so they didn't know that she was in the house. Anyway, my friend agreed to sleep with me in my room for a night, just so I could feel safe. That night, at around 2 a.m., I woke up to go to the bathroom. I got up from my bed and saw that my friend was completely covered in the blanket she was using, and I left the room. I spent several minutes in the bathroom, and after I was finished, I walked back to my room. When I saw from the outside that my room's door was slightly open, I also heard some inexplicable banging and thudding noises coming from inside my room. And after hearing those noises, I immediately entered my room and turned the lights on, only to see both of my brothers on my bed, and my youngest brother was wielding this massive bludgeon-like weapon. The bludgeon he was holding was covered with blood, and there was blood all over the blanket under which my friend was sleeping. And then, I realized it. My brothers had mistakenly used it on my friend thinking it was me. I screamed a blood-curdling scream when I saw this horrific sight in front of me, and when my brothers saw me, their faces fell as pale as snow. The bludgeon dropped on the bed and unable to think what to do, I just sprinted towards the bed to see if my friend was alive, and when I pulled the blanket off her, I screamed again. Her face was absolutely disfigured and barely even recognizable because of how hard my brother smashed her face in with the bludgeon. There was blood all over the bed. I had a panic attack right there and then, and I ran out of my room screaming, and I left my apartment in the frenzy too. I dialed 911 outside and called an ambulance and the police. My friend was transported to the nearest hospital when the ambulance came, and unfortunately, she was pronounced dead at that hospital. And my brothers were both also arrested by the police, and they were subsequently incarcerated for first-degree murder. My brothers admitted to the police that they had planned to kill me in my sleep. They said that after killing me, they were sure they'd get our father's wealth. But worst of all for me is that I'll never recover from the sheer trauma of that unimaginable situation, the utter monstrousness of it. And I curse myself eternally for asking my friend to sleep with me that night in my apartment. I just feel such a guilt for it all, and I don't think I can ever forgive myself for my friend's death, which I hold myself partially responsible for, and probably always will.
He asked for a three-way with another girl and I said yes if we can also have one with a man, and now I'm the bad guy. I'm bi and my boyfriend has known this since we met and got together 3 years ago. He always thought it was hot. Just recently he asked me if I'd be down for a three-way with another girl. I'm really open-minded and I said I was open to the idea. I then told him I've always fantasized about a male-male-female three-way and asked if we could also give that a try, but now I'm the bad guy and S for wanting that. He literally said, if I knew you were this much of an S before we got together, I would never have entertained this. Oh, but he didn't mind my stories of experiences I've had with other women and I wasn't an S then and it was just so hot to him. So he can suggest putting his D in another woman, but it's a problem when I ask if we can try it with another guy too? I'm so sick and tired of some men thinking they're the only ones allowed to have fantasies, but God forbid I do too, and I'm now the S. Now he's threatening to leave me. Like, okay. Is he expecting me to cry about this? Actually I am crying, but they're tears of joy for getting this weirdo out of my life. He showed me his true colors and now I want no parts anyway, so I could care less honestly. 3 years down the drain, but whatever.
Call my wife petty for not giving her original gift to her brother after she was uninvited from the wedding? Have fun never seeing her again. My wife Lena and I have been together for 15 years. We are both still madly in love with each other. We were each other's high school sweethearts, and everything worked out perfectly. Another great thing is that our families get along extremely well. Except for us and Lena's eldest brother George. Lena crochets a lot and often gifts it to friends and family. When her second oldest brother got married, she made the bride a shawl to wear over her dress in the evening. The bride loved it, and ever since Lena has made shawls for everyone in her family getting married. Now Lena's oldest brother, George, 26 male, is getting married again, for the 5th time. Lena and I don't have a relationship with George as he was abusive to her as a child. One time when Lena was 11 years old, and was getting babysitted by her older brother, she remembers after he put her to sleep, he came in her room and tried to rope her, but didn't get to finish because her parents came home. She has never told her family about this existing conflict because she never wanted to hurt her brother or disturb her family. Even after all of that though, if she has to see him then she is polite but distant with him. She doesn't want to cut off the rest of her family because of George. I work with George and while we aren't friends, we are friendly at work. Lena encouraged this. When George got moved to my team I was going to request a transfer, not wanting to expose Lena to George as my team do a lot of get-togethers with our significant others. Back to George's 5th wedding. As it is a family wedding, Lena's mom asked her if she could crochet a shawl for George's fiancée, and Lena agreed. It was arranged that once it was finished I would take it to work to give to George so that Lena didn't have to see him. Earlier this week, the shawl was completed and I emailed George at work to let him know that I would bring it in today as the wedding is tomorrow. When I got into work this morning, I gave George the shawl and let him know that Lena and I were looking forward to the wedding. Come lunchtime, Lena called me to let me know that George's fiancée had called her and told her that she was no longer invited to the wedding, citing the place they are having the wedding and the reception is too small for the number they have coming, so are having to make cutbacks. However, I was still invited to the wedding. I was mad at this because they clearly only invited Lena to get a shawl, which to me is just rude. If they had asked Lena outright to make one, she probably would have done because she loves to crochet, and has such a kind heart. So I did something that I knew would cause some conflict, but I was ready to accept it, and I don't regret my actions from this point on. On my way out of work, I noticed George wasn't at his desk but the shawl was. I was still mad that they had used Lena to get a shawl and I just shoved it in my work bag. I left a note on his desk telling George since Lena was no longer invited, the shawl and I would no longer be attending either. On my way home, I told Lena what I had done and asked her if she wanted to go out instead, so not to waste having a sitter. Lena was upset that I had taken the shawl as it was causing an uproar in her family group chat where people were calling her petty because I took it back. Lena wants me to give it back. I don't think I should, they don't deserve Lena's kindness. However, at the same time, I don't want Lena to be upset with me over George and a shawl. But what happened next was even more crazy than what I had done. Pilots, what's your worst experience thus far? I had just recently gotten my private pilot license and, just a few weeks before, had bought my first airplane. I'd already gotten 10 hours of dual instruction in my new craft, but my insurance also required me to fly 10 hours solo before carrying any passengers. I planned some short trips on my own, the last of which was to Vegas and back. It's not a fun city without friends, so I hadn't planned to stay, just fly up, get a bite to eat at the airport, and fly home. My plan was to land at Las Vegas International, which lies at the center of a mass of what's called Class B airspace. Learning to fly around LAX, I'd gained plenty of experience flying near this kind of busy and restrictive airspace, but into it? Not as much. I reviewed the charts and mentally prepared to tangle with complex and unfamiliar airspace and its controllers. It was a sweltering Saturday afternoon. The weather was perfect, but the instructors standing around the flight school had a concern. Make sure you're hydrated before you go up there, one said. The route from LA to Vegas goes through the Mojave Desert. You don't want to get lightheaded or pass out while you're flying. And make sure you have extra water in case you go down. Wise advice, it seemed. I drank a bottle of water. Then downed a second just to be sure. For good measure, I also filled a sports bottle with ice water and stuffed it into my flight bag. I lifted off from Santa Monica and pointed the plane towards the mountain pass to Palmdale. The plane was operating beautifully. Let me tell you, there's almost nothing that beats flying 165 miles per hour over a highway while the cars underneath you are stuck in traffic. I settled in at 7,500 for the 90-minute flight. As I reached the desert, I realized a slight flaw in my flight planning. All that water was having an obvious effect. I had to pee. It's not that bad, I told myself. This can wait. I'm only an hour away from landing. Over the next 10 minutes my body informed me, no, this wouldn't wait an hour. I tried to focus on the sectional chart, but my mind kept wandering to Niagara Falls and the giant Bellagio fountain. I'd be tangling with Bravo airspace soon but couldn't even think straight. Okay, I thought. What are my options? I looked down and found the only one, my sport bottle. Step 1 was to empty it. The only place to do that seemed to be into my stomach. Have you ever tried throwing back a pint of ice water at a time when your bladder feels one turbulent bump away from rupturing? It's not easy. I finally managed to do it, feeling like an overfilled water balloon. Now for step 2, refill the bottle. The air was smooth and the radio was quiet. I might just be able to get away with this. I carefully trimmed the plane until it flew straight and level without control inputs. I took my hands off the controls tentatively, nothing seemed to happen. I opened the bottle, ever so carefully unzipped and got myself into it. The relief that followed was indescribable, euphoric. Relief quickly turned to panic. The bottle seemed to be filling at an alarming rate. Was it possible that my bladder actually had a larger capacity than this bottle? I really didn't want to find out empirically. I'd owned this plane for 3 weeks and I sure wasn't going to let my own pee geyser erupt from this bottle all over my upholstery. Alas, the bottle was opaque. I willed myself to stop peeing, pulled myself out and peeked in the bottle to check how much space was left. This cycle repeated several times, one hand holding the bottle and the other holding myself to prevent pee from spraying everywhere like a loose fire hose. I had no hands free to fly the plane. Then I noticed something else, a hiss. I realized I was cold because of air, not liquid. Where was this airflow coming from? The latch had not been secure. My door popped open. My indicated airspeed was about 120 miles per hour, and turbulent air raced past the door. It was also the first moment in my life I remember being afraid of heights. I sat for a moment, dumbfounded. My heart raced. Both hands were still occupied holding my bottle and my junk. What the hell do I do? Oh God. Okay. Let's figure this out. First things first, I decided that this was not an emergency. The only thing that would make this an emergency, I reasoned, would be if I somehow fell out of the plane. I used my non-bottle hand to verify my seatbelt was secure. I also checked behind me to make sure there was nothing loose in the back seat that might depart the aircraft. I decided I was safe. What next? I needed both hands to close and latch the door. My hands, however, were occupied with Operation P-plosion. So, I reasoned, the correct next step was to finish peeing. I would look back later and see this as having been my first major executive decision as a pilot in command. With wind whooshing past, I filled the remaining third of the bottle, sealed it up, and set it on the floor like a boss. Finally, with both hands now free, I tried to close the door, no luck. The wind was too strong. I throttled back, slowed the plane down to about 75, and was able to slam and latch it at last. I made my way into Las Vegas, landing and shutting down in front of the executive terminal where all the fancy private jets land. I grabbed the bottle and hopped out of the plane to use an actual restroom and find some food. I took 20 steps and froze. It was Las Vegas. It was a Saturday afternoon. Playboys and party girls were descending on the city. There were 2 private jets parked in front of me, they literally had red carpets running out to them. Fashionable men were emerging from the aircraft with women on their arms. I was standing there in a ratty t-shirt, unshaven, and holding a warm bottle of my own piss. I couldn't do it. I turned back. I found a quiet spot on the tarmac near my tie-down and emptied the bottle onto the ground. I hoped it would be discreet, but I guess I hadn't had enough to drink after all. The pee was a radioactive shade of yellow. Just when I thought the situation couldn't possibly get any worse, someone parked in the next row was starting up their turboprop. The prop wash propelled my ocean of shame sideward, spraying warm pee over me, the tarmac, and my plane. I returned to Vegas a couple of weeks later. It doesn't rain there very often, so the ramp was still stained yellow. I hope it's gone by now, But if you're ever there and see a yellow patch, raise a sports bottle and toast the day I learned how to keep my cool.
My narcissist golden child sister got impregnated by my boyfriend and years later has come crawling back after he turned abusive towards her, so I made sure she paid for all those years of abuse. My sister Christy was my parents' golden child and I grew up hating her for it. We were raised in the same house by the same parents, but treated completely differently. Christy went to private school, was chauffeured around by our stay-at-home mother, and was given a hefty allowance of $125 a week. I went to public school, rode the public bus and walked everywhere, and never had an allowance. No extended family would say anything beyond claiming my parents and sister loved me, that I have to understand that it wasn't their place, and that maybe things would be better if I tried harder to please. I hated my extended family just as much as I hated my parents. Christy mocked me relentlessly growing up. She was the pretty one and the smart one. If I got upset by her mocking, I was told I'm being sensitive and that it was sibling love. If I said hurtful things right back, I was grounded because I took it too far. I wasn't allowed to outshine her, I wasn't allowed to have friends. My clothing was policed by her and the few nice clothing aunts and uncles would get me would be replaced with frumpy and unattractive clothing. It would end up in her wardrobe. My parents would back up Christy saying I couldn't pull it off and that it looks inappropriate when I wore it. The rest of the family, the people who gave me the clothes included, would compliment how good she looked and pretty much validate Christy. I know for a fact that I am and have always been attractive. Even in those ugly outfits, I managed to get asked out on multiple dates and got a boyfriend sophomore year. Said boyfriend knocked up Christy our senior year after cheating on me with her since I got my early admission letter and was neglecting him and the family. She told me the day before my graduation, claiming he was going to marry her and they were in love and it grew from me abandoning them both. Our mother was there and because I didn't really react, she thought I was being a good sister and said she was so proud of me. I didn't cry about it. I just packed up my car when everyone was asleep, skipped my graduation and the supposed party that was planned, and I left. My only stop was to the police station where I gave them my info, told them that if I'm reported missing that I'm not, and bluntly said I'm running from an abusive family, was going away to college, and never coming back. Got rid of my phone and everything. Went to school, got a good job, bought the condo I was renting, had my dream wedding. The thing is, Christy got in contact with me via Facebook recently. Her DMs consisted of her saying I abandoned her when she needed me most, that she's practically a single mom, her husband, my ex, hates her and got with a woman that looks like me, our parents blame her for me leaving and won't help her, and the entire family treats her kid like crap for being the product of an affair. She didn't get into any of the colleges she applied to, couldn't go to college as a full-time mother. She switched between blaming me for her misfortune and throwing a pity party. While reading, I didn't feel much of anything reading how awful her life turned out. I think I truly just stopped caring and so even karma beating her down didn't give me any joy. Then she both filmed and tagged me in a post that read I feel like I'm drowning and I just need my sister. Why won't you respond? Why did you leave me when I needed you the most? Please, I'm in such a bad place, if you don't help I'll just end it all. I replied via comment and DM, go ahead and do it. I'm not helping you and frankly don't care. You stopped being my sister the day you gave me bleach as a gift, and blocked her shortly after. The logical part of me is telling me that was wrong, but I just can't bring myself to care enough to feel guilty. If something happens to her, I still don't think I'll care. But I do feel somewhat bad that I don't care. Am I obliged to care? My narcissist golden child sister got impregnated by my boyfriend and years later has come crawling back after he turned abusive towards her, so I made sure she paid for all those years of abuse. Part 2. My mother, who'll be called Emma, was able to get in contact with my brother Cam not long after Christy's post was deleted. He did talk to her and shared that I was married, had a good job, so on. He essentially was rubbing in her face that I was living an amazing life and didn't need them. He admits that he saw red when she didn't believe this because I never posted about any of that stuff on Facebook. He sent her pictures of my wedding, specifically pictures that showed how extravagant and intimate it had been. We only had 32 guests and because of mother-in-law's and father-in-law's contributions, we were able to have our dream wedding at a beautiful venue. Cam also listed all of my other achievements, talked about how I finally had parents that loved me and treated me properly. I can't even be mad at him, even though he thinks I should be because Emma figured out where I was based on his bragging about having mended his relationship with me and me staying with him. Based on that, he thinks that's how she figured out where to start looking. Plus, our shared and individual friends and my in-laws are far more active online than I am and not all of them have their accounts private. Cam follows them and they follow him, so he feels like he's to blame. She doesn't know where I live, but she was at a cafe I normally go to with my mother-in-law. I was with my mother-in-law and, well, Cam wasn't exaggerating about me having parents that now love me. When I first met my husband Derek, I had a hard time opening up to him and we both agreed to start as friends and see where things went when I was comfortable with the idea of any kind of intimate relationship. His parents were so kind to me and when we started dating, I had difficulty with them. It was my father-in-law who sat me down one night after dinner and told me that their son loves me and they can see why, so I should love myself and allow myself to be loved too. By that point, I had spent 3 months observing how they treated Derek and his older brothers, how close Derek was with his parents and brothers, and how healthy their relationships were. I blubbered and can admit I fixated on him ruining my makeup. It was my obsessing with my appearance instead of dealing with internal crap phase, and father-in-law just hugged me and said I was adorable but shouldn't ignore my feelings like that because it would just fester. He's amazing and I love him so much. Anyways, mother-in-law and I came to the cafe together, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really recognize my mother until I heard her speak. Her voice is the same voice that used to insult me and yell at me, no different after so many years. I realized who she was when she called my name, and I just turned around and left. I didn't realize my mother-in-law wasn't following me until I was back in my car and about to start it. I got back out and went to go get her. I felt horrible for just leaving her behind like that. Mother-in-law seemed calm when I got back, but Emma was not. She was mid-sentence, and what I heard was, "Your daughter, who do you think you are?" She shoved my mother-in-law, and mother-in-law said, "The one that loves her the way a mom should. Who do you think you are?" And then mother-in-law wasn't so calm because Emma said that lying Ree's real mother. That was all it took for her to jump on Emma. She got in multiple socks before I got her off, and cops showed up not long. I guess the cafe workers or customers called before things escalated. Either way, she was arrested and mother-in-law was bailed out ASAP. She told me it was worth it the moment we were in the car, and I just started laughing and crying when she ranted about how angry Emma made her, thinking she could call my daughter anything degrading and get away with it. She said she was so happy I ran away and found them because she couldn't believe anyone could insult me like that when she knows what type of person I am and probably have always been. You just weren't allowed to be that person. I should have hit her harder. Is it awful that I feel so good about this? It's like my child self is getting her wishes, however delayed the granting is, and I'm just so happy someone loves me enough to be angry for me. Growing up, my parents never defended me from anyone. Most of the time, they'd openly agree with any insult directed at me even when I was right there. As far as Christy goes, at the time I didn't know Cam and Derek were both getting messages too. Derek's response was to send everyone a comprehensive list of everything I had ever vented to him about. He ended each list with a question: "Why should my wife feel any shame for responding that way to one of her abusers?" No one responded to him, and unlike me, he never blocked anyone. Cam's response was to shame them and reveal that Christy has always implied unaliving herself to get her way just like her mother. He shared old texts between him and our parents and some between him and Christy as proof. Yes, she has always done that, and so has our mother, but I didn't know they did that to him too. No one responded to him either. I don't know if there was an actual wellness check. Cam has blocked everyone, including both sets of grandparents, so I guess I have another partner in my no-contact boat.
Am I the a-hole for leaking a celebrity's phone number on accident? I've had my phone number since I was about 15, now I'm 27. Since a couple of years ago, I think about 6 years, this person who I thought was a woman has been using my phone number. I can't change my phone number at the moment due to several reasons. I kept getting calls for Jane Schmidt. Doctors' offices, debt collectors, you name it. At first I thought people accidentally types the wrong number, but it kept happening. I didn't even know how to spell her name in the beginning either, so I couldn't find her on social media to tell her to stop. About 4 years ago though, I was at PetSmart and gave them my phone number for rewards points. I noticed that Jane had used my phone number and even updated it to her name. I took the opportunity to take a picture of her name to look it up later. Lo and behold, there's only 2 people in US with that name. One lives in CA, and the other lives in GA, where I live. I found her address on a public website and sent her a letter. Next morning, I received a phone call and the number was very similar to mine. Let's say last 4 digits of my phone number is 1234, and the other party's ends with 1324. The rest are the same. I answered it and it's the Jane lady. Except that was no Jane. It was Jaden Smith, and he was apologizing profusely, but laughing, and said it'll never happen again. For a couple of months, it really did stop. The second it started again, I texted Jaden that he needs to stop. He got upset and claims he's never used my phone number for anything. After that interaction, I started giving out Jaden's phone number whenever I got calls asking for him. Now Jaden is upset by this and has been cussing me out. I've already blocked him and laughing about it. Petty, yes, but I don't think I'm an asshole. If this gets 20 million, I have no problem leaking his phone number. What's the worst crime you've been the victim of? I was kidnapped as a toddler. My mom was a teenager when she had me, and her mom was convinced that she wouldn't be able to care for me. She insisted that my mom allow her to adopt me. My mom, having suffered years of abuse by her mom, including being given over to a man with a history of crimes involving the exploitation of children, told her to get lost. Lawyers got involved, CPS got involved. Thankfully CPS saw that my mom was taking excellent care of me and saw my grandmother's extensive file with them, and refused to hand me over. A few weeks later my grandfather, who my mom was still on speaking terms with, asked my mom for permission to take me to the park. My mom agreed on the condition that my grandmother not be there. You can guess what happened. My grandparents immediately took me into Mexico. By the time my mom realized something was wrong, we were already across the border. My mom called the police, who immediately told her there was nothing they could do. She called the Tijuana police, who told her that an American baby was not their problem. About 2 weeks later, my mom got a call from her sister's husband, informing her that my grandparents were back in town to get some things from their house and to run errands, so they dropped me off with them. My aunt was on my grandparents' side and refused to tell my mom, so her husband snuck out to call. My parents by this point had formed a small group of my dad's friends and were about to leave to kidnap me back, so they all rushed over to my aunt's house instead. The guys broke down the door and held all three of my aunts back until my mom found me in a back bedroom and got me out of there. I know what kind of woman my grandmother was, so I'm terrified to think about what would have happened if my parents hadn't gotten me back. My schizophrenic husband locked me in the bathroom and wouldn't let me out because the voices told him to do so. He knows I have claustrophobia and I'm deathly scared of him now. My husband has schizophrenia and he was very open about it since the day I met him. My friends told me not to pursue anything because he was a psycho, but I never saw him that way. To me, he was an amazing man who got dealt an unfortunate hand in life. We have been together for 4 years total and the schizophrenia only started to seriously affect him about 6 months ago, when his father was mugged and unalived. Something like this is of course very traumatic, but it sent my husband into a spiral where he started fully believing that everyone, including me, was out to get him. We tried so many different medications but none of them worked, and my husband became deathly terrified of the world. If we would ever cuddle, he would randomly check underneath the mattress to make sure I didn't hide a knife there. If I was in the kitchen making food, he would not go near me because he was convinced I was out to harm him. We never have intimacy anymore because he thinks I will suffocate him during it. There was one instance where I accidentally hurt him by squeezing a pressure point of his too hard while giving him a massage, and since that day he has become almost terrified of me. It hurts a lot that my own husband is scared of me, and no matter how much I try to reassure him that I would never hurt him in any way, he does not believe me. He tells me that the voices in his head know that everyone is out to get him, and that he has to live life on guard at all times of the day. The massage incident happened around 2 months ago and ever since then he has started getting the jump on me. This means that he will hurt me sometimes out of nowhere, because he is convinced that I will do it to him, so he may as well do it to me first. I remember the first time he did this. He smacked me over the back with a rolling pin because the way I was holding the kitchen knife was suspicious to him. The smack itself was hard enough to leave a bruise, and this definitely should have been my red flag to leave. I cannot tell you how patient I have been with him, how many times I have coddled him or held him while he cried, only for him to turn around and scream at me to get the F away from him. I have cried myself many times. Throughout the last 2 months, he has not just bruised me with a rolling pin. He has stolen from me, pricked me with hair clips, bit me, hid things from me, headbutt me and has even threatened to pour hot water on me. Life was already very hard with him, and I was at my wits' ends. I was equally as scared of him as he was of me, with the only difference being that my fears were justified. I was contemplating leaving him, but I couldn't justify leaving him in such a time of need. Without me there was a good chance he would take his life, he had told me so after all. But what happened yesterday has me on the verge of filing for divorce. I was getting ready to go to work, and I was in the bathroom doing my skincare. Without warning, my husband came to the bathroom door and locked it from the outside with the key. At first I thought he was pulling a prank, but I was wrong. I screamed for him at first, and told him to please let me out, but he would not. I heard the open door open and close, and I knew I was trapped in the bathroom. Now I have claustrophobia from childhood trauma, and after spending another 30 minutes or so locked in the bathroom trying to break the door down unsuccessfully, I had a breakdown. I destroyed the bathroom during my breakdown, tossing everything onto the floor and curling up into a ball and crying. I don't know how long I cried for, but I managed to regain composure. Luckily, our bathroom has a small window which I decided to use to try to cry for help. I yelled for a while before one of my neighbors heard the screaming and went into their back garden to check, and I was able to communicate with him that he needed to call the police to come get me out. It was now roughly 2 hours since I had been in the bathroom. The police arrived 20 or so minutes later, coincidentally at the same time as my husband. The door did not need to be broken down thankfully, and my husband let me out himself. The police questioned us after, and that's when I got my husband's reasoning for doing so. He claimed to the police that he knew that I was going to do something today to him, and that the voices told him to lock me in the bathroom in order to prevent me from hurting him. Upon hearing this, the police looked very concerned for my safety, and all of us drove away where we ended up admitting my husband to involuntary psychiatric hold. He will be held there for 21 days. I ended up missing work and got about a dozen calls from my manager, but when I explained the situation she seemed very understanding. I'm now waiting for the 21-day period to be over to see how my husband is after all of this. I'm very scared of him, but there's still a part of me that hopes he will return to normal.
My deadbeat baby daddy abandoned me when I was pregnant and now wants custody of our baby, so I planted drugs in his car and got him arrested. I got pregnant at 17 years old from a guy I knew from high school. He was the neighborhood drug dealer and didn't care about his future at all, so when I told him I was pregnant he ghosted me. When my son was born, I did not put the guy's name on the birth certificate, and told the hospital that it was a sperm donor. For 5 months there was no sign of him. I was a single mom trying to manage working a full-time job all on my own. Then one day I randomly ran into him at the mall. At first I tried to avoid him, but then he noticed me. He looked at our son and asked, "Is this him?" and pointed out how the baby looked just like him. I tried to push past him but he grabbed my arm and asked if he could visit him. As much as I wanted to say no, I thought that it would be nice to have some help so I told him if he could come by my apartment once a week. I figured that it would be a good way to see how he was with our son. In the beginning, he came every week, and at first things were not bad. One day, he asked if he could watch the baby at his place. I was hesitant at first, but thought since he was pretty good with him and the baby likes him, why not? That night he came to pick up the baby and I went out with some girlfriends, something I had not been able to do since I got pregnant. I didn't stay out late, something didn't feel right about leaving my son at his house, and so I was at his place even before 10 p.m. And I was glad that I did. Even before I knocked on the door, I was slapped in the face with the smell of weed. I quickly began to panic and bang on the door. It took him 3 minutes before finally opening the door. His eyes were bloodshot and his clothes reeked. I pushed him out the way, demanding to see my son. He told me to chill out and that the baby was fine, that he was playing in the room. I looked around and the house was a total mess. The couches were dirty and had cigarette burns on the arms, the dishes were moldy and piled high, and the floor looked like it had not been swept or mopped for months. Just the thought of my son crawling on the floor left me sick to my stomach. I quickly snatched the baby and headed home, vowing that he will never take care of him again. You would not believe what happened next. 2 weeks later I got a letter from the court saying he wanted custody. I was pissed. Who the hell did he think he was trying to take my son from me? I knew I had to keep him away from him for good. So I decided to invite him over to talk about the situation. He arrived late at night, already high. I decided to meet him in his car since the baby was asleep, and we argued for 10 minutes. I told him that it was not fair that he was trying to take my baby after abandoning us. He said that as a father that he also had rights and I couldn't keep him from his own son, and now that he was there, he is there to stay. Angry, I told him that he better be ready for a fight, and he laughed in my face and told me to get the fuck out of his car. Before leaving, I purposely dropped a bag of powder in the car, like the ones he would sell when we were together. When I got into the house and he sped off, I quickly called the police. I told them that he was high and was trying to sell drugs to minors in the town. He was arrested immediately. Thankfully, the court dropped the custody case because he was in jail, and getting caught with illegal narcotics made him unfit to be a father.
I stopped cheating on my wife to prove my love, but she still doesn't appreciate me. I don't understand. Like a lot of people, I struggled with infidelity throughout my relationship. I was with my fiancée for 7 years, and for 5 of those years I cheated constantly. It hurt me more than you can imagine, and I was tired of hurting the love of my life, so I decided to make a change. However, that change wasn't appreciated. 2 years ago I decided enough is enough and to work on my infidelity issues. Yet, she gives me zero credit for this. Anytime I go out with the boys, she's blowing up my phone. It really dampens the mood of my nights out. She feels insecure about the female friends I have, especially my girl best friend. I love the girl from the bottom of my heart, but it's draining. I hate having to explain myself and watch my loyalty go unappreciated. Her mom said she needs to do a better job at recognizing the effort I put in to change, that it's only in a man's nature to cheat, so for me to stop shows how much I love her. Her mom has been great in trying to help her with her insecurities. My parents, not so much. They were a hindrance for a while, trying to feed my fiancé lies. They told her that they saw me and my girl best friend doing the deed, but we just kissed. After I told them to cut it out or I'd stop paying their mortgage, they finally agreed not to interfere in my relationship anymore and focus on the wedding. We are going to counseling to help her appreciate me more. I love this person and can't wait to spend the rest of my life with her. She's a fantastic woman, and I understand it will be a process for her to trust me. I just want her to appreciate the effort I've put in. There's no reason I should get more praise from her mom than her. My boyfriend stole my medication to save me. Long story, extremely short, I had an accident a couple weeks ago and needed surgery. Since it was relatively invasive, I was prescribed an opiate to take for my pain. My boyfriend, who I've been with for a few months, has been helping me with basic things that I was having trouble with right after surgery. He, as well as other members of his family, have had issues with addiction. And he made it very clear that I wouldn't be allowed to do any substances or smoke if I was going to be around him. It was no issue because I never did anything like that before I met him. Anyway, when he picked up my prescription before we left the hospital and he saw the medication I would be taking and told me, "You can't have this." Then we had a whole argument about it before we even left the hospital. His point was I could just take Tylenol and that these things are addictive. I don't know anyone since I moved away pretty recently, so he's the only one who would be able to help take care of me. So I agreed. Not even a day went by, and I was in so much pain, and I told him that I needed my medicine. He again started arguing with me, and we came to the agreement that he would hold on to them and give them to me when I needed them, not what I wanted, but it seemed like a fair compromise. A little over a week later now my pain is getting worse and not better. I was only taking 2 a day, maybe 10 hours apart, but I was in really bad pain halfway through the day. So I asked him for my medicine and he told me I can't have one until later when I usually take it. I told him I need it now because I was literally shaking in pain, and he told me it's withdrawal and I'm becoming too dependent. At this point, I'm getting pissed because I'm in pain and can barely stand, and he won't tell me where my meds are, so I start looking around for them. And the whole time he was yelling, "I'm not going to let this happen to you, too. I won't let you fall victim like I did." Not only was he making me even more mad, but he was being so embarrassing with all the crazy stuff he was saying. I get that he doesn't want me to get addicted. He barely even knows me. He ended leaving a couple hours ago, but not before telling me how grateful I'll be for him saving my life. Since he left, I'm guessing he took the medicine with him, so I'm not even bothering to look anymore. So now I'm sitting alone in my bed, dreading the fact that I'm gonna have to drive myself to the hospital. My friend ruined several people's lives and I'm glad he did. I have a friend from high school, we were somewhat close but never best friends. He was always super chill, calm during a crisis, really mellow and kind. He didn't talk a lot about what he did and was pretty private about his personal life, which our friend group always respected. He always disappeared immediately after school because he said he had a part-time job. In 10th grade, a girl who we sort of knew was SA'd and the 3 people who did it were never charged. Everyone knew they did it, but they were on a sports team and got away with it. She committed self-destruction later that year. My friend and I are in college now and we've gotten a lot closer. One night he asked me if I remembered that girl and I said yes. He asked me if I remembered the guys who did it and prodded me about how I felt about them. Obviously I hate them and said so. I was drunk and this was the first time we'd ever really spoken about this, so I was loud about it, and he got this sort of bizarre look on his face and showed me their Facebooks, Instas, other socials, news articles, public info, etc. It was a really effing in-depth investigation of their lives and I admit I was weirded out at first. Apparently none of them are in college now. One is working minimum wage, one is serving time, one isn't doing anything except bumming around at home. He told me that he'd actually been friends with the girl before her self-destruction, which I never knew, and that he'd quit his part-time job and started, in his own words, obsessing over getting justice. The main thing I remember was just how drunk I was and how weirdly calm he was. It still feels really fuzzy to me. He pulled up a drive with literal years of evidence. For one guy, he used his reputation as a teacher's pet to lower his grades, since the teachers believed him when he said the other guy didn't pull his weight on a major group project. That ruined his sports chances because he didn't make the GPA cut and the coach dropped him. He managed to find one of their private emails by reading it over his shoulder and used this Spokeo-like site to dig up more info. He anonymously emailed screenshots of their essay threats to the school counselor and got one of them investigated. He wasn't charged, but it made his team drop him because he couldn't show up to practice anymore. There was so much more I won't go into. There was a bunch of little things too, like how he sometimes shared cheat sheets in the class group chat that had wrong information to keep their grades lower. I also used those sheets. He apologized for making my grades worse, or how he convinced a few upper year friends of his not to tutor one of them and they failed physics. He swore that he never made up any rumors or false information and worked as legally as possible since he was still hoping the courts would charge them. That never happened, but he did end up tipping the scales enough to ruin their lives. According to him, they ruined their own lives. He just documented it and sent it to the right people. When we were done, he told me not to tell anyone and I promised I wouldn't. We sat there for a while and my head was spinning because I had no idea he'd done all of this. He thanked me for listening and said he'd never admitted any of this before, and went to bed. I admit I'm still disturbed by this, but it's not like he can unruin their lives now, and at least they face some sort of consequences. The more I sit with this, the more I think that I'm glad something happened even if it was like this. We're still friends, I still trust him. He admitted that he's probably got a mental disorder that made him this way and he's been in therapy for a long time. To this day, none of them ever faced justice for what they did to her, but their lives fell apart anyways. I'm glad that happened. I'm glad he did what he did. Am I the a-hole for threatening to never speak to my father again? I have recently been dealing with the fallout of finding out that mom had an affair 11 years ago, and that my brother Danny might not be my dad's. They're now getting a divorce, and in the middle of all of this it turns out that dad wants a paternity test for Danny, and if he isn't, he doesn't want custody or to support him after he turns 18. I found all of this out because I happen to have been eavesdropping, which is a habit I've had since I was a little kid, and it's clearly a necessary one because neither of my parents can be trusted to make smart decisions. I basically told mom and dad that if they went through with the paternity test and it was negative and dad cut Danny off like he was planning, he would lose me as well. I would oppose living with him after the divorce. I would make any visits absolutely miserable. I would go no contact with him the moment I turn 18, and I would side with mom if I have to testify about anything in the divorce. Dad tried to say that he had to know because it was a symbol of betrayal if he was someone else's kid and all that poop. Look, I understand, I really do, but they've told me my whole life to focus on myself and my siblings and let the adults handle the adult problems, so I'm cashing that in. He can work it out himself. He said that I was being unfair and I needed to look at it from his side and not mom's. I told him I'm not on mom's side, I'm on Danny's side. I reminded him that when I was 6 and mom got back from hospital, he put Danny in my arms and told me I had to look out for him because I'm his big brother. This is me doing exactly that. Dad offered to do family therapy. I said that that was a great idea, after the divorce is finalized with Danny being treated the same as me and our sister. If he plans on cutting Danny off if Danny turns out to not be his biologically, no amount of therapy is going to fix that, and no amount of therapy is going to get me to accept his decision. It was best to just not do the paternity test in the first place. The rest of the family is split. Kira, my sister, says that dad has a right to know. The weird thing is that with my grandparents it's actually mom's parents who think everything is best out in the open, and dad's parents who think some questions are best left unanswered. Grandma reminded dad that he'd been raising Danny for 10 years and is his father in every way who matters no matter whose bit squidged into whose and made him. Basically I'm officially cashing in my worry about yourself and your siblings, not the adults card, and focusing on what's best for Danny, not anyone else. Me and him are a package deal. If dad cuts him off, he loses me as well. My daughter is a sociopath. Ever since she was a child she never seemed normal. She was always drawn away from us and very hostile. My partner and I lock her in her room at night to protect ourselves and to make sure she doesn't get into anything dangerous to harm us. We have caught her trying to get into our pew-pew safe, as well as multiple attempts of grabbing weapons from the kitchen to try to unalive our son. We have tried everything. We have given her love, attention, toys, heart-to-heart conversations, one-on-one hangout days, and therapy. We even admitted her to a mental hospital for a year because she kept threatening to kill us and her little brother. Nothing had worked. Her therapist tells us everything we already do. Every other day we plan family game night like Just Dance, bingo, etc., and it always ends with my daughter threatening to murder us in our sleep. She was soon after in a mental facility for 2 years after that, and when she came home she was somehow worse. It got to the point where I was afraid for my family's safety, especially our son. So I looked into wilderness therapy. Before anyone says it's bad, I know it's bad. I know how they treat the children there. At this point I just want my daughter gone. This family has taken enough of her abuse, and I have tried to make sure it didn't get to this point. I even asked family members if they could take her in, and they all declined because they are afraid of her and don't want to handle her. So I admitted her in, and she leaves Monday. She is 16 and will stay there until she is 18, where she can check herself out and leave. Before anyone calls me a bad parent, understand that it's hard to have a child be a part of your life when they grab a knife from the kitchen in the middle of the night and try to unlock your door to kill you. Or when they try to drown your other child. I understand this will be hard for her. I will always love my daughter and will miss seeing her. But she needs to know that. This happened because of her actions and negligence. For those asking why I can't put her back in a hospital. She always gets sent back early with therapists claiming she has made improvements and is not a threat to us. I understand many people are wanting her to go to a hospital instead, but they keep sending her back and ignore my words when I tell them what she has been doing to us. They shrug it off and send her home. Also, a lot of people are commenting that I am throwing my daughter away when that is very far from reality. I love my daughter with my whole heart and I never want anything bad to happen to her. However, I need to make sure my family is safe from her, and this is the only way I can do that. What's the most disturbing secret you've discovered about someone close to you? The 24 hours before my dad died of lung cancer, he was in the ER and then the ICU, and we were unable to be with him because of Hospital 2020 rules. My mother, sister and myself had been texting and calling him all day and got no response. My mother even called the hospital and spoke with one of his ICU nurses who said he was awake and communicating fine. He passed very quickly at 3:30 a.m. the next morning. We were allowed to be at his bedside, but by then he was no longer conscious, so we said our goodbyes and he was gone. Later that morning while my mom slept, I was calling cremation services to schedule his body for pickup at the hospital, and going through his bag of belongings the hospital had returned to us. His phone was in there and I wanted to read all our texts and take some comfort in my last words to him. I opened his phone and all our texts had not been read, not mine or my mom and sister's. I thought this was so odd, but figured he must have been suffering so much he couldn't find the strength. I began to scroll through his apps and noticed a chat app I'd vaguely heard of. I can't recall the name, but it essentially works like WhatsApp. I opened the app and saw a single contact with a female name. I started reading and realized my dad has been chatting with this girl hourly for the last 24 hours and as far back as I could scroll. He was calling her princess and telling her he loved her, and she was saying she was scared for him and wanted to know what was going on. Why was he in the ER? I scrolled back enough to know that this was someone he was having at the very least an emotional affair with. My grief was completely hijacked by hurt and anger, and a week later I tracked the girl down and spoke to her and found out she was 15 years old. She was 13 when they met. He was her high school bus driver and she told me they had been dating for almost 2 years. My dad was 66 years old when he died and dating someone younger than his grandchildren, someone he chose to spend his last moments with and say his last goodbyes to.
What is something you've done purely out of the goodness of your heart, but have never told anyone? My friend told me he was between leases for about a month. We had a sleepover one night and basically, I just never told him to leave. I lived in a micro studio, so we shared the bed, I bought the groceries, and let him wear whatever of my clothes fit were appropriate. I'm a chick. He'd cook for me, clean while I was asleep, other nice things that showed he appreciated it. We never talked about it. I never told anyone he was living with me. Our friends just thought we were hanging out a lot, which we did do before, so it wasn't weird. He stayed with me for about 3 months. When Thanksgiving came, his own family didn't reach out to him, so I hosted him at my parents' house. They were living in a different state at the time but didn't sell the house. I am pretty sure I saved his life. He was depressed at the beginning. I definitely saved him from being homeless. I have no idea where his possessions were or how he had money, but honestly, I didn't care. I just took care of him any way I could, and he paid me back in love and amazing